Chapter 2476, Ling Han's Breakthrough. The celestial seed mark inside Ling Han's body had already been nearing perfection. In fact, it might have already become perfect, but there had simply been no urgent need for him to advance, so he had kept holding it off until now. Yet, he was being relentlessly hunted by Dongfang Rui and the two celestial kings, and this enraged him immensely. At the same time, it also stoked a strong desire for him to break through. He wanted to become a celestial king, and then he wanted to pummel those bastards. His celestial seed was most likely already perfect, flawless. There was no need to nurture it any further. However, breaking through to become a first heaven celestial king was a matter of grave importance, one from which there was no turning back. It was because of this that he was being so utterly careful, and it was because of this that he had delayed breaking through for so long. However, with Ling Han's personality, once he made up his mind, he would never hesitate again. He immediately started to break through. He loosened his cultivation, and his aura instantly rose explosively. Dark clouds gathered overhead, with arcs of lightning cracking amid them. Heavenly tribulation was forming. This was a celestial king tribulation. However, because Ling Han was so powerful, it didn't appear like an ordinary celestial king tribulation at all. Instead, it looked like the tribulation of a second heaven celestial king. Crack! A bolt of lightning slammed down, transforming into a giant that had a razor-sharp sword in its hand. It viciously slashed down at Ling Han. With a roar, Ling Han fearlessly charged forth. At the same time, he also had to solidify the celestial seed mark in his mind, transforming it into a real and tangible seed. He then had to borrow the power of heavenly tribulation to nurture it. As for how much it could grow, this would be up to his talent and luck. In fact, it was during this stage that celestial kings would enjoy the fastest growth and development. Afterward, their advance would slow down significantly. Ling Han unleashed his celestial physique of time. These few hours were far too important to him, so he couldn't afford to waste a single second. Not only that, but he even needed to do everything he could to extend this time. Boom! He was immediately struck by heavenly tribulation, which caused his entire body to disappear. Meanwhile, a huge crater appeared in the ground, measuring a whopping 300 meters deep. However, in the next instant, Ling Han immediately dashed out from the crater, soaring into the sky. He was fighting a heaven-defying battle. In fact, facing heavenly tribulation here put Ling Han at a huge disadvantage. This was because he was being suppressed by the purple light, causing his battle prowess to drop significantly. He was completely no match for heavenly tribulation. However, even though he knew this, he still chose to advance here. There was naturally a good reason for this. The more difficult the circumstances, the greater the benefits if he succeeded in overcoming the odds. Moreover, Ling Han also wanted to know whether the purple light would be targeted by heavenly tribulation for interfering. After all, it was rumored that this purple light was emitted by the vegetation of this place. If heavenly tribulation targeted them, then even these plants would have to face a tribulation. In the center of these ruins, there were also a large number of celestial kings battling with these plants. Thus, would they be dragged into the mess as well? That would surely be a lively scene. However, it was a shame that heavenly tribulation wasn't enraged by the interfering purple light. This disappointed Ling Han greatly. Ling Han continued to resist heavenly tribulation with his full strength. Otherwise, this second heaven celestial king tier tribulation could potentially kill him. It was true that he liked to take risks, but he definitely had no desire to commit suicide. Meanwhile, he continued to rapidly solidify the celestial seed mark in his mind. Rumble. Heavenly tribulation unleashed its divine might, and it was as if it didn't want to allow a freak such as Ling Han to advance. Arcs of lightning crashed down, carrying with them the furious great Tao of lightning as they smashed into Ling Han. Ling Han was neither furious nor alarmed. Instead, he continued to focus on what was important. Under the furious barrage of lightning attacks, Ling Han was like a blade of grass swaying about in the storm. His body was covered in burns, and he looked much like a seared piece of wood. His vitality was as weak as could be, and it was as if he were about to die at any moment. His celestial seed mark was composed of countless threads, appearing as complex as possible. At this moment, only a single thread remained incomplete. As long as he completed this thread, it would no longer be a celestial seed mark. Instead, it would become a true celestial seed. Boom, boom, boom. Heavenly tribulation became increasingly violent. Once Ling Han advanced, his newfound strength would definitely shatter some kind of equilibrium. Thus, heaven and earth had to suppress him no matter what. Countless lightning giants surrounded Ling Han, furiously attacking him with their lightning-formed weapons. They wanted to kill him. Ling Han channeled the indestructible heaven scroll, forcefully raising his defenses. He then abandoned all resistance, focusing his full attention on the final thread. Even though this was the final step, if he failed to complete it, his battle prowess as a celestial king would end up at least 10 times weaker. It was because of the critical importance of this step that Ling Han focused all of his attention on completing the final thread of the celestial seed mark. This was the most critical moment. Using his divine sense as a guide, he summoned a supremely radiant thread in the air, using it to connect 2 nodes, and completing the shell of his celestial seed. Boom! His aura rose explosively, and it was as if he possessed the power to easily crush all celestial bodies. In the distance, Ji Wuming, the Empress, and the others all watched on. "He's indeed extraordinary," Shi Chanzi said in astonishment. "He's only just become a celestial king, yet the might of heavenly tribulation is already comparable to that of second heaven celestial kings. If I hadn't witnessed it with my own eyes, I definitely couldn't have imagined it." Ji Wuming remained silent, yet his eyes burned with fighting spirit. Hua Furong shook her head, and said, "This brat still hasn't displayed his true abilities yet. I have a feeling that his greatest strength is his body art, not his power of regulations." Everyone was stunned upon hearing this. One had to realize that Ling Han had faced the tribulation of a second heaven celestial king upon advancing to the celestial king tier. This was a clear sign of his terrifying power. Yet, she was claiming that this wasn't Ling Han's greatest strength? How could they believe this? However, it was Hua Furong who had uttered these words, so who dared to doubt her? The Empress, Hu Niu, and bewitching Maiden Ro all wore proud expressions. Ling Han was someone who could manipulate fundamental powers that only heavenly venerates could interact with. This was a power that far exceeded the level of regulations. Thus, it was only natural that he was as freakish as could be. Boom, boom, boom. Heavenly tribulation became increasingly violent, intent on killing Ling Han. Pung! The lightning giants attacked in unison, and Ling Han wasn't able to block them even though he had channeled the indestructible heaven scroll. It wasn't long before his energy was exhausted, causing the golden sheen on his body to dim. Whoosh! The lightning giants attacked again, sending thousands of lightning blades at Ling Han. Not good. Everyone's expression changed drastically. This was the most critical moment for Ling Han. If he chose to block this attack, all of his previous efforts to solidify the celestial seed would have been in vain. However, if he continued to ignore heavenly tribulation, he might be ruthlessly struck to death. This was an incredibly difficult situation. However, a smile spread across Ling Han's face. He activated the great Tao of time, sending his divine sense into another realm that surpassed time itself. It was as if everything had become frozen in time. In fact, even the furious attacks of the lightning giants became as slow as a snail's crawl. The reactions of Ling Han's physical body naturally became extremely slow as well. However, his divine sense was transcendent above this. Most importantly, he only needed his divine sense to solidify the celestial seed. A brilliant ray of light formed in his divine sense, connecting the final 2 nodes. At this moment, his celestial seed was finally completed. Wang! A powerful aura burst out from Ling Han's body. He had already been extremely powerful to begin with, yet he now ascended to a new height. He was a celestial king. At this moment, Ling Han had genuinely broken through to the Celestial King. His mind relaxed, and he immediately exited this transcendent state. Boom, 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 boom. The attacks of the lightning giants instantly accelerated, mercilessly slamming toward him. Come! Ling Han was fearless as he clenched his fists and charged forward. Chapter 2477, Boundlessly Powerful. Pang, pang, pang. Ling Han forcefully lashed out, instantly throwing more than 1,000 punches. With his powerful body arts, he could indeed punch at such a rapid speed. One after another, the lightning giants were obliterated. Not a single one of them could withstand more than one strike from Ling Han. Shi Chanzi and Jia Lan were transfixed with shock. Even though they could also defeat Second Heaven Celestial Kings, they definitely couldn't do so with just a few casual punches. However, Ling Han had obliterated thousands of such beings in an instant. Just what did this signify? Even the pupils of Ji Wuming and the Rain Emperor contracted. They were also stunned by Ling Han's overwhelming battle prowess. Only Hua Furong remained calm and unflustered. She was confident that she would be no weaker than this when she advanced to the Celestial King tier. First of all, Ling Han was indeed powerful. After becoming a Celestial King, his vitality index immediately shot up, exceeding 6,600. Second of all, however, the lightning giants weren't genuine living beings, and they were only a form of energy. Thus, they would immediately shatter in the face of overwhelming power. Even so, this didn't diminish Ling Han's might. His ability to obliterate thousands of lightning giants in an instant was a reflection of his unfathomable power. However, Heavenly Tribulation didn't give up. Rumble. Many more lightning giants materialized. However, it was impossible for their battle prowess to rise. Thus, all of them were still at the early stage of the second heaven. That being the case, how could they possibly threaten Ling Han? He casually lashed out, using punches and kicks to shatter the lightning giants. He was treating Heavenly Tribulation like his plaything. He was clearly only a first heaven celestial king, and he had clearly only just advanced. Once he advanced to the peak stage of the first heaven, would he be powerful enough to rival those at the early stage of the third heaven? Ling Han continued to nurture and grow his celestial seed. This was the period of time when it would grow the fastest. Once Heavenly Tribulation ended, this chance would also be gone. He fought against Heavenly Tribulation, transforming the lightning into nutrients to feed the growth of his celestial seed. This was the power of heaven and earth, so it was naturally beneficial to his celestial seed. The celestial seed sprouted at a rate that was visible to the naked eye. First, it was 2 leaves that grew. Then, it was the roots that extended, embedding themselves into Ling Han's divine sense as they continued to grow. Half a day passed, and Heavenly Tribulation finally dissipated. At this moment, Ling Han's celestial seed had already grown into a sapling. It was 15 centimeters tall, and it had a dozen or so lush green leaves. However, it radiated with an indescribably paramount aura. Ling Han shut his eyes, sensing the powerful energy within him. Judging from the appearance of his celestial seed, he was most likely still at the early stage of the first heaven. If there were 10 levels to the early stage, then he had already reached the 7th. He was closing in on the middle stage. This was simply astonishing. For most people, it would take at least several million years to advance through the early stage. However, if Ling Han took advantage of the peculiar light and peculiar fragrance of this place, he could potentially breeze through the early stage in just a few years. This comparison was as stark as could be. More importantly, what did this signify? Once he raised the limit of his cultivation, his body art would experience explosive growth. At the same time, his divine demon sword could also become a genuine celestial tool. Combined together, just what kind of lofty heights would his battle prowess reach? Ling Han excitedly retrieved his dimension scroll, yearning to extract its power to feed his body art. "Heh, so this is where you are," a familiar voice said with a cold chuckle. They looked over, only to see that Dongfang Rui and the two celestial kings had caught up to them again. They had naturally noticed the commotion caused by Ling Han's tribulation, and it was because of this that they had caught up so quickly. However, they had still arrived a little too late. Ling Han had already completed his tribulation. "You've broken through," Dongfang Rui exclaimed as he looked at Ling Han. There was a ribbon of peculiar light around Ling Han, and this was a clear sign that he was a celestial king. Dongfang Rui frowned upon seeing this. Trying to kill a fellow celestial king was far too difficult. Unless he was a third heaven celestial king, it would be almost impossible to suppress Ling Han. However, considering the immense suppression of this place, and taking into account the fact that Ling Han had only just advanced, rendering him unfamiliar with his newfound power, it was perhaps not an impossible task to kill him. Ling Han wore a beaming smile as he said, "It's time for payback." He then looked at the two second heaven celestial kings, and said, "If you two don't want to die, hurry up and piss off." The two celestial kings observed Ling Han's aura. He was clearly a first heaven celestial king, yet he made them feel a strong sense of apprehension. However, after hearing Ling Han's words, they were naturally very displeased. Regardless of how powerful he was still only a first heaven celestial king. Thus, where was his arrogance and confidence coming from? "I don't believe it. How can a measly first heaven?" Pung. Just as one of them opened their mouth to voice their displeasure, a streak of light flashed past their eyes, bringing with it a solid fist. This fist was incredibly fast. Just as he was about to raise his hands to block it, he suddenly discovered that he couldn't move even a single finger. The space around him had been completely restricted. He then felt a heavy weight strike his body, sending him flying into the distance. The other second heaven celestial king was also just about to condemn Ling Han's naivety and arrogance. However, he immediately bit his tongue upon seeing this. Fuck. Is this truly a newly advanced celestial king? With a single punch, he had sent the second heaven celestial king flying into the distance. This sent a chill through his body, and it also caused cold sweat to form on his forehead. Dongfang Rui was also astounded. He knew that Ling Han was a monarch star, so it was only natural that he would become mightily powerful after advancing to the celestial king. However, he hadn't imagined that he would become so boundlessly powerful. He had defeated a second heaven celestial king with a single punch. Ling Han cracked a grin as he turned to the remaining celestial king, saying, "What did you want to say? Come on, spit it out. I guarantee I won't stop you. I'll let you finish before I pummel you to death." This was a blatant threat. However, this was an extremely effective threat. The celestial king wiped the cold sweat from his brow, and he felt an urge to say something to get back at Ling Han. However, the scene of Ling Han's punch continued to replay in his mind, causing more sweat to pour down his body. Even though that punch had been incredibly quick, catching his companion off guard, his companion had still had some time to react. However, it was as if his body had been completely restricted, preventing him from moving even a single finger. The regulation of space. It was difficult for celestial kings to kill fellow celestial kings because once the weaker party felt threatened, they could immediately turn around and flee. It would be extremely difficult for their opponent to catch up to them. However, if the two parties were engaged in close-quarters combat, and one party had mastered the regulations of space, the situation would be completely different. Trying to flee while under the restriction of the regulations of space would be incredibly difficult. This restriction was equivalent to severing his path of retreat. Even if he fought with his full power, it was still very likely that he would be killed. The celestial king naturally didn't dare to make a squeak. He had never pledged his life to anyone, and he was more so a domineering force on this celestial path. As such, how could he sacrifice himself for someone else? Ling Han retracted his gaze from the celestial king. He then turned to look at Dongfang Rui. He didn't speak, yet Dongfang Rui's body started to involuntarily tremble. An indescribable chill washed over him. Even though he had dominated an entire generation before, enjoying the title of strongest under celestial kings, and even though his father was a heavenly venerate, what did this matter? At this moment, could the sealed emotion heavenly venerable charge here to save him? However, he was a resolute person, and he immediately removed the restriction on his cultivation as he retrieved his celestial tool. He started to break through to the celestial king tier. If he didn't become a celestial king, he would definitely be killed by Ling Han. At the same time, he could no longer rely on the two celestial kings. One had been severely wounded, and one didn't dare to move. A smile tugged at the corners of Ling Han's lips. With a flick of his right hand, the divine demon sword materialized in his palm. Xiao! With a toss, he threw the divine demon sword forward, imbuing it with the regulations of time, regulations of space, and a myriad of other regulations. With a flash, the sword had already arrived before Dongfang Rui. Pooh! It directly stabbed into his skull. Chapter 2478, Celestial King 2480, Subduing a Celestial King. Pooh! The divine demon sword carved a brilliant arc through the air before ruthlessly piercing Dongfang Rui's skull. Dongfang Rui's eyes widened in shock. If he raised his eyes slightly, he could see the swaying sword that was embedded in his head. Ling Han had controlled his power extremely well, with the sword only just piercing Dongfang Rui's divine sense. In fact, the tip of the sword didn't even come out the other side of his head. Thus, the sword swayed up and down, and it looked as if it might fall out at any moment. Dongfang Rui reached up to grab the divine demon sword, yet the energy in his body was draining at an alarming rate. At this moment, he was even weaker than a 3-year-old infant. I know what you want to say, Ling Han said as he walked over. He wore an apathetic expression as he continued, I'm sure you want to threaten me by bringing out your father again. So, let me save you some energy. I'm not afraid of your father, and there will come a day when I drag him off his throne and beat him until he becomes a dead dog. Remember this. When your father enters the afterlife, ask him if he died like this. Dongfang Rui wanted to speak, yet when he opened his mouth, he couldn't speak a word at all. He wanted to use his divine sense, yet his mind had already been pierced, so how could he do so? He could only emit a gagging sound as the vitality rapidly drained from his body. He couldn't accept this. As a monarch star, as the son of a heavenly venerate, as someone who had been sealed for several epochs so he could compete for the flawless celestial king, as someone who could become a heavenly venerate in the future. Now, however, he had been ruthlessly killed before he could even become a celestial king. If he had known that this would happen, he would have definitely chosen to become a 9th heaven celestial king first. After all, he would still have a sliver of a chance to become a heavenly venerate. It was just that this chance would be much smaller than if he obtained the flawless celestial seed. Now, however, everything was futile. I'll be waiting for you, Dongfang Rui said, drawing on the last ounce of his power. This was the culmination of his resentment and despair. He refused to die before he uttered these words. This wasn't a grand agreement or whatnot, but was instead the greatest desire in his mind. He wished for Ling Han to die quickly, he wished for Ling Han to enter the afterlife with him. Ling Han smiled, and said, It's more realistic to wait for your father. Farewell. He pulled back the divine demon sword. Pooh! A jet of blood sprayed into the air, after which Dongfang Rui fell limply to the floor. He was undoubtedly dead. However, his eyes were still wide open, showing his anger and despair. Beside him, even Ji Wuming and Hua Furong had their mouths slightly open in astonishment. It was as if they could barely comprehend this. That was the son of a heavenly venerate. Not long ago, the Jiuwu heavenly venerate and the sealed emotion heavenly venerable had only agreed to stop hunting Ling Han because of heavenly venerate Wu Li's threat. If they dared to touch a single hair of Ling Han's, heavenly venerate Wu Lu would kill all of their descendants. Both heavenly venerates had children, so they were naturally afraid of this threat. Now, however, Ling Han had killed Dongfang Rui. What could hold the sealed emotion heavenly venerable back now? However, after some careful thought, since Dongfang Roy could hunt Ling Han, why couldn't Ling Han kill him in return? Oh, so Dongfang Roy was immune to Heavenly Venerate Wu Li's rage? Ling Han wore a radiant smile. Heavenly Venerate Wu Lu would naturally hold the sealed emotion Heavenly Venerable back for him. In fact, even Zhou Heng would help him. This had been a battle between youths of the same generation, so life and death was their own responsibility. How could seniors interfere? The two second heaven celestial kings both trembled in terror. They were filled with petrification. Ling Han had killed the son of a Heavenly Venerate without so much as blinking his eyes. What were they worth? They exchanged a glance, and exclaimed, "Run!" While Ling Han's attention was elsewhere, they immediately made an attempt to flee. "Since you've already come, why don't you stay for a while longer?" Ling Han raised his hand, making a pressing motion at the two celestial kings. The regulations of time rumbled forth, detrimentally affecting their speed. The two celestial kings fled with all their might, yet they quickly discovered that they were moving as slow as a snail. In fact, even the falling leaves were moving faster than them. They were absolutely horrified. This was the regulation of time. Was this youth the reincarnation of a ninth heaven celestial king? He had only just advanced to the celestial king tier, so how did he possess such mastery over the regulations? Where had he found so much time to cultivate? "We need to go all out," the two celestial kings roared. Boundless power of regulations surged from their bodies, instantly shattering the restriction of time. After all, at the celestial king tier, all regulations were equal. However, even though they shouted this, one of the celestial kings seized the opportunity to flee as the other continued to battle Ling Han. "You!" The battling celestial king was enraged. However, Ling Han wasn't worried at all. He smiled at his opponent and said, "Rest assured, I won't let him escape." He then flicked his right hand. Xiao! The divine demon sword shot forward, slicing through the air at an impressive speed. Pooh! The divine demon sword instantly pierced the left shoulder of the fleeing celestial king. Under the immense momentum, he was sent crashing to the ground, where he was ultimately impaled. In fact, it was only because he had dodged in time that the sword had impaled his left shoulder. Otherwise, it would have directly pierced his heart, and the divine demon sword would have at least consumed his blood essence. "See, what did I tell you?" Ling Han mused to his struggling opponent. The celestial king trembled in terror. He felt like Ling Han wasn't a human at all. Instead, he was a demon from head to toe. How could he be so powerful? So be it if he was powerful. Most importantly, how was he so fearless? He was genuinely displaying no hesitation toward killing others. A thought flashed through his mind, and he immediately fell to one knee, stammering, I'm willing to submit to you, Lord. I'm willing to fight alongside you, my lord." He announced his surrender to Ling Han. This was an inconceivable sight. A second heaven celestial king was actually expressing his loyalty to a newly advanced celestial king? This was utterly comical. Ling Han reached over to pat the celestial king's shoulder. The celestial king was scared to death. He was afraid that Ling Han would suddenly attack and kill him. With each pat, his heart would shudder in fright. Fortunately, Ling Han didn't attack him. However, he couldn't relax at all, and cold sweat continued to flow down his body. Ling Han finally retrieved his hand with a smile, saying, "All right, you can follow me in the future." "What's your name?" "Lord, this subordinate is called Fu Yuan." The celestial king had initially wanted to refer to himself as this lord. However, he realized this was far too arrogant, so he immediately changed to refer to himself as I. However, this also seemed inappropriate, so he settled for using the tone of a subordinate. After all, he was now a subordinate of Ling Han. "Lord." The celestial king who had been impaled by the divine demon sword also crawled up. However, he didn't dare to remove the divine demon sword. He ran up to Ling Han before dropping to one knee, saying, "This subordinate is called Cheng Tao. I'm also willing to serve my lord and offer up my measly strength." If the Dark Frost Celestial King saw this, he would definitely flare up in rage. Back then, Fu Yuan and Cheng Tao had only formed an alliance with him. Even though he had been the alliance leader, there had been no explicit hierarchy among them. Now, however, these two celestial kings were kneeling and announcing their servitude to Ling Han. This could naturally infuriate him to death. Ling Han smiled, and said, "Very well. Offer me a wisp of your divine senses, and I'll accept you as my underlings." The expressions of Fu Yuan and Xing Fu changed drastically. Once they offered up their divine sense, even though their life wouldn't be in the hands of Ling Han would be able to easily find them using their divine sense. They wouldn't be able to hide anywhere. If Ling Han were ruthless enough, he could even shatter their divine senses and severely wound them. However, at this moment, could they reject this offer? If they did, death would be their only fate. However, they didn't want to die. Chapter 2479, Breaking Through Together. Courage had nothing to do with strength. The rage of a commoner could cause blood to flow 5 steps 1. However, as powerful as a celestial king might be, there would also be times when they bowed their heads to save their skin. Ling Han charged back with Cheng Tao and Fu Yuan, destroying 7 of the Dark Frost Celestial King's camps in just half a month. Only then were they willing to stop for a rest. Cheng Tao and Fu Yuan naturally did most of the hard work. They were afraid that Ling Han would be dissatisfied with them and suspect that they were still loyal to the Dark Frost Celestial King. Ling Han temporarily stopped his advance. This was because they had already occupied more than 9 camps. Occupying any more than this would be useless. Moreover, if they continued to advance, they would get closer and closer to the Dark Frost Celestial King. Even though they had greatly hurt the Dark Frost Celestial King at this moment, they still hadn't crossed his bottom line yet. However, if they occupied all but 2 or 3 of his camps, he would definitely be forced into action. He would stop at nothing to charge forward and fight with them. At that time, things would become much more troublesome. After all, Ling Han's vitality index was still far from reaching 8,000. Moreover, the others indeed needed some time to rest. Feeling pressured by Ling Han's advance, Hua Furong, Ji Wuming, the Rain Emperor, and the others also started to consider breaking through. Their celestial seed marks were also nearing a state of perfection. Of course, this notion of perfection differed for each person. It was dependent on their resources and knowledge. Thus, it was possible that their notions of perfection were completely different. Meanwhile, Ling Han chose to stabilize his cultivation first. He would then forge the divine demon sword into a true celestial tool. Afterward, he would advance the level of his body art. By doing all this, he was confident that he would be able to rival a 3rd heaven celestial king. In fact, with the suppression of the purple light, perhaps even those at the peak stage of the 3rd heaven were no match for him. This was because his body arts wouldn't be affected by the purple light. This was his own power, and it wasn't reliant on the power of regulations. 1 day, 2 days. 1 month, 2 months. 1 year, 10 years. Time flew by. Ling Han and the others were all fully concentrated on cultivating. They were self-aware, and they understood that they were too weak to charge into the center of the ruins at this moment. They had to become stronger first. 90 years later, Ling Han finally managed to fully stabilize his cultivation. At the same time, he also reached the middle stage of the 1st heaven, causing his battle prowess to rise significantly again. He started to reforge the divine demon sword. Using the greatest eternity everlasting physique, he experienced 1,000 days when others only experienced 1. The divine demon sword started to change drastically, with symbols appearing on it one after another. They all radiated with an indescribably domineering aura. Celestial tool. At this moment, Ling Han no longer needed to funnel his power into the divine demon sword. With a single thought, the divine demon sword would actively attack his opponents, unleashing a boundless might. Because it was so sharp, and because it was indestructible, even third heaven celestial kings wouldn't dare to face its might. Ling Han wore a faint smile. Just by relying on the divine demon sword alone, he would already possess the right to challenge a third heaven celestial king. However, it was never his habit to rely on external power. This was even though he had raised the divine demon sword from the very beginning. Only his own strength was true strength. He had never forgotten this. He started to practice his body arts. With the dimension scroll in his hands, he started to channel the model given to him by Wally. Mysterious formulas continued to float through his mind, allowing him to extract energy from the dimension scroll. Boom! Paramount power surged into his body. However, he was still unable to grasp this power. Even so, it tempered his muscles, bones, and meridians as it flowed through him. Rumble. Heavenly tribulation was on the verge of forming again. Void particle energy was the most fundamental energy of the Genesis world, and theoretically speaking, only heavenly venerates could wield this energy. Moreover, whenever a heavenly venerate appeared, they would be targeted by heaven and earth. Now that he was interacting with void particle energy, Ling Han was no exception to this rule. Heavenly tribulation formed overhead, yearning to strike him down. Ling Han flirted with danger as he continued to grow his strength. However, after becoming a celestial king, each step forward would require an exorbitant amount of time. This was an extremely slow process. Another 100 years passed, yet Ling Han was still unable to raise the power of his body arts to its limits. There was still room for improvement. Meanwhile, Hua Furong, Ji Wuming, the Empress, and the others all advanced to the Celestial King Tier 1 after another. They all became significantly stronger. The most terrifying among them was none other than Hua Furong. Even though she had only just advanced to the first heaven, she could already rival Ling Han. She indeed lived up to her title as the #1 celestial maiden in history. Of course, this was under the condition that Ling Han didn't use his divine demon sword or body arts. In reality, regulations were only tools that helped them become heavenly venerates. Upon becoming a heavenly venerate, what they would wield was the fundamental power of the Genesis world, which could be used in any one of the realms with the exception of first-tier heavenly venerates. However, regulations were different. If a 9th heaven celestial king from the celestial realm ran over to the foreign realm, they would be nothing but trash. Ling Han had already interacted with the fundamental power of the Genesis world in advance. With regards to this, he had already surpassed Hua Furong by a huge margin. When they reached the peak stage of the 9 heaven and started to cultivate toward the heavenly venerable tier, Ling Han's advantage would become far more obvious. He would leave Hua Furong in the dust. Meanwhile, Ji Wuming also continued to stay on Ling Han's heels. If they battled at the same cultivation level, he would be no weaker than Ling Han. Again, this was under the condition that Ling Han didn't use his divine demon sword or body arts. Right now, they weren't in a hurry to set off. Instead, those who needed to chose to stabilize their cultivation, and those who needed to chose to continue their advance. Upon witnessing the sparring sessions between Ling Han and the others, the final bit of vexation in Qing Tao's and Fu Yuan's mind vanished. These people were absolute freaks. Just how crazy was this? These people had only just become celestial kings, yet they were all far more powerful than them. How was this fair? The Empress, Hu Niu, and the Rain Emperor also advanced to the celestial king tier. However, they were slightly weaker than the freaks in Ji Wuming and Hua Furong. With that said, this was only by a little bit. The gap between them wasn't big at all. Right now, there were still 500 years until the 10,000-year limit. After some discussions, they decided to rest and cultivate for another 100 years. After everyone's cultivation was stabilized, they would set off for the center of the ruins. From the information they had gathered, none of the forces had conquered the last few areas yet. They were all locked in a stalemate. Thus, there was no need to hurry. Ling Han continued to refine his body arts. Even though a dimension scroll could help a mortal human become a heavenly venerate, signifying the immense energy that it possessed, the manner in which Ling Han was using it was extremely inefficient. As he continually extracted the energy, it would only flow through his body once before dissipating back into heaven and earth. Could this last until he became a 9-heaven celestial king? It would be extremely difficult. He wondered if such dimension scrolls existed in the transcendent dimension. Theoretically speaking, that dimension was being attacked by hysteria and at risk of collapse at any moment, so it would most likely develop a sense of danger. This would then result in more heavenly venerates being produced. Thus, it was possible for dimension scrolls to exist in abundance. He would worry about this later. Ling Han continued to extract power from the dimension scroll to refine his body arts. However, even though he had already accelerated time for himself, his progress was still extremely slow. Perhaps it would really take him another 100 years to reach the limit. However, was this truly slow? He was at the Celestial King tier, where advancing one minor tier every epoch wouldn't be considered slow. Meanwhile, he had only spent several hundred years. Even accounting for the accelerated time, he had only spent a few 100,000 years. Yet, his body arts could already rival those at the 2nd heaven or even 3rd heaven. Just how terrifying was this? In the blink of an eye, 100 years had already passed. Compared to when they had just broken through, they were all much more powerful. This was largely thanks to the peculiar light and peculiar fragrance, which allowed them to rapidly stabilize their cultivation and even see improvement. Time for battle. Chapter 2480, Profuse Apology. If Ling Han and the others could only be regarded as troublemakers when they arrived here several hundred years ago, they could definitely be regarded as mighty dragons now. In terms of the power of regulations alone, Ling Han and Hua Furong were tied in the first place. They both possessed a vitality index of almost 8,000. However, if body arts were taken into account, Ling Han would definitely be the most powerful among them. His vitality index would exceed 8,000, reaching a whopping 8,400. This was already approaching the level of celestial kings at the peak stage of the 3rd heaven. Of course, this was only theoretically speaking. How could celestial kings be ordinary people? After all, even king tiers found it almost impossible to become celestial kings. At a minimum, they had to be emperor tiers. Thus, the vitality index of 3rd heaven celestial kings would most likely be around 8,600. This was slightly more powerful than Ling Han. However, if he took into account the divine demon sword as well, Ling Han was confident that he could rival any 3rd heaven celestial king. Right now, his weakness was surprisingly his physique. After becoming a celestial king, he required an exorbitant amount of treasures to practice the indestructible heaven scroll. Even though he had taken the treasures of many ancestral kings a while ago, he had already consumed most of them. Moreover, these were treasures from a different realm, so they were still a little bit different. In any case, they weren't sufficient to fund his current cultivation needs. Only when he left the celestial path, and perhaps only when he ventured to the transcendent dimension, could he cultivate the indestructible heaven scroll to a higher level. Even so, his physique had still genuinely advanced to the celestial king tier. His defense index had exceeded 5,000, and this was still extremely astonishing. Before they could set off, a significant piece of news reached their ears. After so many years of vicious battle, the various forces had finally managed to conquer the remaining areas. According to rumors, these central structures were fairly extraordinary. Not only could they resist the purple light, but they even possessed other peculiar abilities. Some could automatically refine alchemical pills as long as the necessary ingredients were provided, while others could refine tools as long as the necessary materials were put in. Some could even attack by themselves, launching beams of light that could obliterate all matter. Right now, the situation was already settled, and the various forces were conducting the final round of talks. They had reached a ceasefire agreement, and they had all agreed to fight for the paramount treasure in the central region together. This also signified that the Dark Frost Celestial King was finally free to target Ling Han and the others. This information had been gathered by Fu Yuan and Qing Tao. Their faces were scrunched up in anxiety. This time, they would definitely lose the opportunity to leave the celestial path. In fact, even their forces on the celestial path would be targeted by the Dark Frost Celestial King. In the future, they might become lonesome souls. Even though they knew that Ling Han and the others were extremely powerful, they could at most only defeat those at the second heaven. If they encountered third heaven celestial kings, they would definitely suffer defeat. What they were most afraid of eventually arrived. Several days later, a messenger came bearing a letter from the Dark Frost Celestial King. His words were extremely arrogant and haughty, and he demanded that Ling Han and the others go and profusely apologize to him. Otherwise, he would lock the transfer formation in the center of the ruins, forcing them to stay on the celestial path forever. This was a ruthless tactic. Although it was necessary to travel through the celestial path to become a celestial king, there was only a limited amount of resources here, so the scope of what they could achieve was also limited. Ling Han and the others were all monarch stars or supreme monarch stars, so if they were trapped here forever, this would definitely be a worse fate than killing them. If you understand, then give me a reply, the messenger said in a haughty tone. Even though he was only at the ascending origin tier, he stood extremely tall and proud before the group of celestial kings. It was as if he were the true celestial king. In his eyes, since the Dark Frost Celestial King had cast his gaze over, these newly advanced celestial kings could only wet their pants and fall to their knees in fright, begging for forgiveness. As a messenger, he naturally had to accept Ling Han and the others surrender first. Ling Han smiled faintly as he raised his right hand. Boom! A ball of flames materialized, instantly incinerating the letter. However, a powerful aura rose from the ashes, transforming into a fist that smashed at Ling Han. This was the handiwork of a celestial king. They had imbued their paramount power into the letter. Even though this fist couldn't unleash the true power of a third heaven celestial king, it was still immensely powerful. Indeed, it wasn't an attack that ordinary first heaven celestial kings could block. In the eyes of the Dark Frost Celestial King, if Ling Han dared to destroy his letter, he would punish the other party with this powerful punch. Even if it didn't strike Ling Han, it would still force him to become extremely disheveled as he dodged desperately. This was a display of strength. This was the lofty might of a third heaven celestial king. Ling Han extended a finger and lightly tapped at the fist. Pa! The fist immediately crumbled, unable to hurt even a single hair of Ling Han's. If the Dark Frost Celestial King had personally come to attack him, Ling Han would definitely have faced him in a solemn manner. However, this was simply an attack that had been imbued in a piece of paper. Thus, did he need to treat it seriously? Go back and tell your master. I'll return the favor in a few days' time, Ling Han said with a smile. The messenger was transfixed with shock. He had personally heard the Dark Frost Celestial King say that if Ling Han dared to destroy the letter, he would definitely suffer grave consequences. However, even though these words rang in his ears, his eyes had witnessed a completely different result. Heavens! Just how terrifying is this youth? He hurriedly nodded in reply, turning around as quickly as he could to leave. At this moment, he truly wished that he had wings to soar away from Ling Han as quickly as he could. He rapidly made his way back, and when he arrived at a camp controlled by the Dark Frost Celestial King, he used a special method to communicate with the Dark Frost Celestial King. When is the brat coming? The Dark Frost Celestial King asked. In his eyes, he had Ling Han and the others in the palm of his hand. They had no option but to yield. The messenger stammered in apprehension. He truly didn't know where to begin. Why are you hesitating? Hurry up and answer me, the Dark Frost Celestial King said in a solemn voice. He absolutely despised subordinates who were slow and ineffective. The messenger gritted his teeth and said, "That person burnt the letter, my lord." The Dark Frost Celestial King faltered upon hearing this. Just how audacious were these outsiders? They even dared to destroy his letter. However, he immediately started to roar with laughter. That person had most likely been wounded by his attack, right? Even if he hadn't, he would still have wound up disheveled. He nodded, and asked, how severely was he wounded? The messenger wiped the cold sweat from his forehead, and replied, he was completely unscathed. He also said that he would return the favor in a few days. The Dark Frost Celestial King faltered again. What? Completely unscathed? How is this possible? Even though that attack hadn't possessed his full strength, it had still been the attack of a third heaven celestial king, after all. Just how overwhelming had it been? Are you trying to trick me? The Dark Frost Celestial King chided in a cold voice. Perhaps you didn't deliver the letter at all? Was this subordinate so afraid of death that he didn't even visit Ling Han and the others? Was he making up excuses now? This subordinate wouldn't dare. This subordinate wouldn't dare, the messenger exclaimed as he hurriedly fell to his knees. Even though they were extremely far away from each other, it was as if he could still feel the burning rage of the Dark Frost Celestial King. This terrified him to the core. He continued to say that this was indeed what had transpired, and that he wasn't lying about anything at all. Only then did the Dark Frost Celestial King silently fall in thought. He also believed that this subordinate wouldn't dare to trick him, especially under his interrogation. However, how could a measly First Heaven Celestial King who had only just advanced possess such great strength? Are there monarch stars among the outsiders? He murmured to himself. A while ago, he had dispatched 2 celestial kings along with Dongfang Rui to hunt Ling Han down. Now, however, Ling Han was still alive and healthy, while there was no news about the 3 people who had been pursuing him. This was proof enough of Ling Han and his companion's strength. However, regardless of how powerful he is, how can he rival a third heaven celestial king? I'll be waiting for him. Chapter 2481, First Battle Against Third Heaven Celestial King. Ling Han and the others set off for the center of the ruins. Each time they came across a camp, they would ask whether it belonged to the Dark Frost Celestial King. If it did, they would directly conquer it. If it didn't, they would act according to the people's attitude. If they were friendly, they would simply borrow some rooms to rest. If they were hostile, they would directly take over the camp. Half a month passed, and the Dark Frost Celestial King lost another 5 camps. Right now, only a measly 4 camps remained under his control. This caused his expression to become dark and furious. After tasking his 3 remaining Second Heaven Celestial Kings with defending the main base, he snuck away to search for Ling Han and the others. He was extremely quick, and it only took him 7 days to reach his 3rd camp. He stayed there, silently waiting for Ling Han and the others to arrive. It wasn't that he didn't want to go to the 4th camp, but rather that it had already fallen. At this time, the Dark Frost Celestial King naturally understood what Ling Han meant by returning the favor. This enraged him to no end. However, with so many of his camps being defeated, it was quite surprising that not a single wisp of his separated divine sense had returned to inform him of what had happened. This confused him greatly. However, he didn't pay much heed to this either. As long as Ling Han and the others dared to attack this camp, he would teach these outsiders a lesson. He would teach them that it was seniors like him who controlled the celestial path. Elsewhere, Ling Han and the others were extremely relaxed as they wandered around. Right now, all of the structures that they had taken control of were vertically aligned. Even though they had already exceeded the maximum of 9, such structures could still bring them great benefits. If they obtained enlightenment, they would stop to comprehend it and also rest for a few days. They were in no hurry to reach the center of the ruins. After all, there were still several hundred years left. Several days passed, and they set off once again. The suppression of the purple light brought great discomfort to all of them. Moreover, the more time that passed, the more powerful the suppression of the purple light became. Thus, they started to hasten their speed. In just 2 days, they saw a building appear before them. This building was 5 stories tall, and it radiated with a ceramic glaze that prevented the purple light from infiltrating it. Ling Han walked over with a smile, and asked, "Can I ask you a question? Is this the territory of the Dark Frost Celestial King?" "Impudence! You actually dare to utter the Lord's name," the guards immediately chided. Ling Han nodded before turning around, and saying, "All right, this is also Dark Frost's territory." "Lord Cheng. Lord Fu." The eyes of the guards involuntarily widened when they saw Fu Yuan and Cheng Tao. What in the world was going on? Why were the two celestial kings trailing behind like subordinates? Moreover, they were at the very end, signifying that they had no standing at all. Cheng Tao and Fu Yuan both wore awkward expressions. Even though they had belonged to the Dark Frost Celestial King's force before, they had both enjoyed a transcendent status. They hadn't been subordinates of the Dark Frost Celestial King. Now, however, their situation was completely different. They genuinely felt ashamed to face others. A Celestial King walked over, and asked, "Friend Cheng, Friend Fu, what's the meaning of this?" There was a single ribbon of iridescent light around him. His name was Sun Dong, and he was the guarding Celestial King of this building. Cheng Tao and Fu Yuan both ignored him as if they hadn't heard his question. Firstly, there was indeed no need for them to explain. Secondly, Ling Han was their master, so they didn't dare to supersede his command either. Ling Han smiled, and said, "This territory is mine now. Are you going to leave by yourself, or do you want me to send you away?" "How audacious," someone said in a cold voice. It was as if this voice had traveled over from the depths of the world. Dark Frost Celestial King. Cheng Tao and Fu Yuan exclaimed in unison. Even though they were mentally prepared to meet him sooner or later, they hadn't expected to come across him so soon. A Celestial King appeared at the entrance, with 3 ribbons of iridescent light hovering around his body. Boundless bursts of ice-cold aura also gathered around him, appearing as terrifying as could be. He was none other than the Dark Frost Celestial King. Ling Han roared with laughter, and said, "After obliterating so many wisps of your divine sense, I'm finally able to meet you in person. It was truly difficult to find you. Young man, you think I won't dare to kill you just because you have a powerful background in the outside world?" the Dark Frost Celestial King asked in a cold voice. He was one of the most powerful beings on the celestial path, so he never needed to consider the consequences when he did something. Moreover, if he obtained the huge opportunity this time, he would no longer need to worry about Ninth Heaven Celestial Kings, Heavenly Venerates, or whatnot. Ling Han shrugged, and said, "If I truly bring a Heavenly Venerate over, and you still dare to speak like this, I'll truly respect your bravery. In any case, enough with the nonsense. Since you're finally here, I'll give you 2 options to choose from. The first option is to become my subordinate, and the second option is death. Alright, you can choose one now." Ha ha ha. The Dark Frost Celestial King tilted his head back and roared with laughter. Where was this brat getting his confidence from? "I'll go," Hua Furong said as she charged over. She immediately swallowed a subduing purple fruit. They had obtained several of these fruits on their way here, so each person had no fewer than 5 opportunities to unleash explosive power. She wasn't underestimating her opponent, and she directly retrieved her celestial tool as well. An ancient mirror hovered above her head, pulsating with the power of regulations. "Fire," she roared. The origin flames of heaven and earth burst forth, transforming her entire body into one of flames. These were devastating flames that could even incinerate regulations themselves. The Dark Frost Celestial King was astonished upon seeing this. This young girl was clearly just a First Heaven Celestial King, so why was her power making him feel a sense of apprehension? Her battle prowess was indeed inferior to his. However, after taking into account her celestial tool, she was definitely strong enough to threaten him. Was she truly a First Heaven Celestial King? Hua Furong charged over, and the Dark Frost Celestial King had no option but to meet her attacks. He summoned the Great Tao of Water, creating a streak of black water wherein each drop was as heavy as a planet. These were incredibly deadly droplets. Pung. The two celestial kings exchanged a blow. Sure enough, Hua Furong's battle prowess left her at a disadvantage. However, thanks to her celestial tool, she was easily able to rival her opponent. Ancient symbols continued to appear in the ancient mirror, emitting a mysterious chant that was seemingly divulging the most primordial secrets of heaven and earth. The ancient mirror glowed with a destructive radiance that even the Dark Frost Celestial King didn't dare to face head-on. He had to block its attacks with his full strength, or else he would also suffer severe injuries. The Dark Frost Celestial King was completely unable to suppress his opponent. His defenses were breached by Hua Furong, and the two of them continued their vicious battle on the building. Boom, boom, boom. Just the shock waves of their attacks alone were powerful enough to frighten Second Heaven Celestial Kings. Ling Han and the others were in no hurry to interfere. They easily shooed the others away before finding the control core of the building. Ling Han marked it with a wisp of his divine sense, and this allowed him to connect all of their conquered camps. If someone else completed this step, this building would be treated as part of another force. This was a fairly comical scene. The battle had yet to conclude, yet the building had already changed owners. The Dark Frost Celestial King was both astonished and enraged. With a roar, he turned around to flee. He was giving up. Of course he was giving up. Even his camp had been conquered by his enemies, and Hua Furong's battle prowess was also immensely powerful. He wasn't confident that he could suppress her. Moreover, there were so many people on Ling Han's side, so what would he do if there were a few more powerful celestial kings? Thus, he decided to retreat. He would return after he found a few helpers. Ling Han didn't pursue him. He could escape from this camp, but could he escape from this realm? In any case, the Dark Frost Celestial King definitely wouldn't abandon his final camp. At that time, they would head over there to find him. They rested for a brief while to dispel the effects of the purple light. Afterward, they would continue to advance, intent on settling their differences with the Dark Frost Celestial King in a single breath. 2 days later, they absorbed some peculiar light and peculiar fragrance again, not only improving their cultivation significantly, but even dispelling the negative effects of the purple light. Thereupon, they set off again. Chapter 2482, Bearing Down. Ling Han and the others continued to advance, conquering another 2 of the Dark Frost Celestial King's camps. Now, the Dark Frost Celestial King only had a line camp remaining. However, this was also his most valuable camp. Sitting in this final tower, the Dark Frost Celestial King wore an ice-cold expression. In fact, it was so dark that it was as if water were about to drip from his face. Ever since attaining Tao, when had he faced such a difficult situation before? He was a third heaven celestial king. Yet, he had actually been forced into such an awkward situation. Fortunately, he had only snuck out in secret. Initially, his goal had been to prevent others from noticing that he had left so that his main camp wouldn't be attacked by others. Now, however, he had managed to conceal a great embarrassment. He had already targeted them himself, yet he was still unable to suppress a few First Heaven Celestial Kings. If others learned of this, would he not become a huge joke? However, he couldn't help but frown when he recalled the battle prowess of Hua Furong. Celestial kings with celestial tools truly possessed a completely different battle prowess. This was also the reason why so many celestial kings wanted to obtain a celestial tool no matter what. He didn't reckon that he could suppress Hua Furong even if he fought her again. Fortunately, the 12 different forces had already reached an agreement a few days ago, forming an alliance to target anyone who dared to think about attacking any of the 12 towers. If one tower was attacked, the others would all send reinforcements. In other words, even if Hua Furong and the others attacked him, he could easily call for reinforcements. However, to call for reinforcements to defend against a few First Heaven Celestial Kings was far too embarrassing. No. He shook his head upon thinking of this. However, a glimmer immediately appeared in his eyes. Right. Why couldn't he invite the Celestial Kings from the other forces over? He could use the excuse of holding a meeting. That way, if Huafurong and the others attacked, he was certain that the other celestial kings would also step forward to help him. At that time, he could drag all of these celestial kings to his side. What a brilliant plan! He immediately sent invitations to the leaders of the various forces. They all gave him face, and before long, 19 third heaven celestial kings arrived one after another. Why were there 19 of them? Because some third heaven celestial kings hadn't reached the peak stage yet. They had already been in teams of 2 when they had arrived at this central region. Being as sly as he was, the Dark Frost Celestial King didn't let slip any information about Ling Han and the others. He maintained a demeanor of calm, and he continued to engage in fruitful conversations with the other celestial kings. However, he was secretly hoping that Ling Han and the others would arrive as quickly as possible. This was because he couldn't keep the 19 celestial kings here forever. After all, they weren't the only third heaven celestial kings on the celestial path. This was also why they had to form an alliance. Otherwise, what did it matter regardless of how many second heaven and first heaven celestial kings there were? Did they need to be afraid? The Dark Frost Celestial King didn't need to wait for long before Ling Han and the others arrived. Lord, an ascending origin tier elite exclaimed as he ran over with a flustered expression. The Dark Frost Celestial King could naturally guess what was happening. However, he kept his emotions in check, and he instead chided in anger, "Why are you acting all flustered? Lord, some people have charged over, and they say they want you to." The ascending origin tier cultivator wanted to continue, yet he didn't dare to keep going. "Speak," the Dark Frost Celestial King said with a frown. The ascending origin tier cultivator mustered his courage, and said, "They want you to clean your neck and go out to accept death." Oh. Who dares to be so audacious? They actually dare to seek the life of Brother Darkfrost, a third heaven celestial king said with a smile. He was extremely short, yet he was also astonishingly plump at the same time. This caused him to look like a round ball. His earlobes were also massive, and they hung all the way down to his shoulder. The Dark Frost Celestial King smiled coldly, and said, "It's most likely just a few clowns." "Dark Frost, that's no way to speak. Since they dare to come here to challenge you, they most likely have some strength. Why don't we head over to meet them?" another third heaven Celestial King said. He was the polar opposite of the Celestial King who had spoken just then. He was tall and skinny, and he looked much like a length of bamboo. "That's right, let's go out to meet them," the other Celestial Kings all said. "With all of us heading over, let's hope that we don't frighten them to death." They all joked and laughed as they headed out. On the celestial path, they were most likely an invincible group of people. Thus, they were naturally fearless. It wasn't long before they arrived at the foot of the tower, only to see the guards collapsed and unconscious. Meanwhile, a group of youths stood tall and proud, radiating with an extraordinary aura. This tower wasn't one that specialized in defense or offense, and it was because of this that it had been breached so easily. In fact, this was a tower that specialized in tool refinement. The ninth descent Celestial King hummed in surprise. This was because he saw Ling Han in the crowd. This was the youth for whom he had done a favor in the past. At that time, Ling Han had only been a pseudo-celestial king. However, even though he had only been a pseudo-celestial king, he had already possessed the power to suppress a first heaven celestial king. Now that he had become a celestial king, just how much had his battle prowess risen? Perhaps he could suppress second heaven celestial kings? Could he perhaps rival third heaven celestial kings? If it were anyone else, the ninth descent celestial king definitely wouldn't ponder this. After all, wasn't this a silly daydream? Who didn't understand the insurmountable gulf between each heaven? How could a measly first heaven celestial king challenge a mighty third heaven celestial king? Was this a joke? However, this person was Ling Han. He had already displayed his freakish abilities while at the pseudo-celestial king tier. Moreover, without enough confidence, would Ling Han have charged over? He would stand aside to observe the situation. In any case, Ling Han still owed him a favor. As such, the initiative was in his hands. Dark Frost, I've come to collect your head. Ling Han roared. This time, he didn't allow Hua Furong to charge in before him. In fact, he had also seen the jittery excitement of Ji Wuming, the Rain Emperor, Hun Yo, and the others, so he immediately stepped forward first. Otherwise, this opportunity would have been stolen by his battle-hungry companions again. The obese celestial king stepped forward and said, "A bunch of naive youths." His title was Buddhist Cloud, and he didn't rank highly among the third heaven celestial kings. He was only at the early stage of the third heaven. Thus, he had occupied a treasured tower with another celestial king of similar strength. However, this was only a group of first heaven celestial kings that he could dispose of with a casual wave of his hand, so he naturally didn't feel worried at all. Ling Han wore a faint smile as he looked at the obese celestial king, saying, "This matter has nothing to do with you. But I want to interfere." "Do you have any complaints?" the obese celestial king said with a loud laugh. These outsiders were far too arrogant. Did they think they could look down on everyone just because they were monarch tiers or monarch stars? More than just cultivation aptitude, cultivation level was also important. Ling Han shook his head and said, "So you insist on poking your head forward for a beating? You've asked for this yourself." "Impudence," the Buddhist Cloud Celestial King roared. Boom! Boundless divine light erupted from his body, and a Buddhist halo also materialized behind his head. It was as if he had truly transformed into a Buddha that was going to subdue spirits and eliminate demons. Ling Han turned around to glance at Ji Wuming. He was the ancient ancestor of Buddhism. However, Ji Wuming remained calm and uninterested. Instead, it was Shi Chanzi who whispered, "Oh, 3 epochs ago, a disciple of ours entered the celestial path, yet never exited again. As it turns out, he didn't die. Instead, he was trapped here and even became a celestial king." In other words, the Buddhist Cloud Celestial King was truly a disciple or grand disciple of Ji Wuming. Ling Han nodded in understanding. Even though Ji Wuming hadn't spoken, he still decided to show some mercy. This was to give Ji Wuming some face. "Come," Ling Han said as he gestured with his finger. He and Ji Wuming viewed each other as competitors, so he was now viewing this Buddhist Cloud Celestial King as a junior, even though the latter's cultivation level was higher. "You're truly trying to defy the heavens," the Buddhist Cloud Celestial King said, laughing with rage. He leaped up, genuinely appearing like a Buddhist cloud as he descended toward Ling Han. Boundless divine light shone into the surrounding. He was going to crush Ling Han to death without launching a single attack. Chapter 2483, Who's the Clown? "Please wait, friend Buddhist Cloud," a celestial king suddenly exclaimed, blocking his path. He was a middle-aged man who had an innocent and handsome expression. There was a single ribbon of iridescent light around him, signifying that he was a first heaven celestial king. A first heaven celestial king dared to block a third heaven celestial king? The Buddhist Cloud Celestial King faltered for a moment before saying, "Perhaps you recognize this brat, so you're stepping forward to speak for him?" He was only willing to stop because this celestial king belonged to his force. Even though he was only at the first heaven, he still had to give him some face. The first heaven celestial king smiled, and said, "Of course not. However, he's only a first heaven celestial king, so I feel like there's no need for friend Buddhist Cloud to personally deal with him." These words fed the Buddhist Cloud Celestial King's ego, and made him feel extremely satisfied. His chubby cheeks shook as he laughed loudly, and he said, "All right, then retrieve this brat's head as a present for friend Dark Frost." "Gladly," the Celestial King said with a slight bow. Before a third heaven celestial king, he still had to maintain a certain level of respect. The Dark Frost Celestial King saw all of this, yet he showed no signs of stepping forward to interfere. In fact, he was eagerly waiting for the Buddhist Cloud Celestial King to be humiliated. That way, he would be forced to stand on his side. The ninth descent celestial king also smiled faintly, yet he also didn't step forward to stop the conflict. He was curious to find out just how powerful Ling Han had become. The first heaven celestial king stepped forward, a cold and baleful expression in his eyes as he gazed at Ling Han. He was called Lu Shi, and he had originally come from the celestial realm. He was only a king tier, and he had come to the celestial path in search of a rare opportunity. The first few times he had come, he had adventured in the outskirts of the celestial path, leaving before the 10,000-year limit expired. The final time he had come, however, he had recklessly adventured deeper, following others across the sea. Nonetheless, even though he succeeded in crossing the sea, he failed to become a celestial king within 10,000 years. Thus, he was unable to teleport away. He was trapped here, yet the heavens suddenly shone favor on him, allowing him to find and ingest a celestial medicine that greatly improved his cultivation aptitude. After several billion years of difficult cultivation, he finally broke through to the celestial king tier. Thus, Lu Shi greatly detested prodigies. In any case, he couldn't leave this place anymore, so he decided to specifically target outsiders in order to soothe his disappointed heart. Ling Han shook his head, looking back and asking, "Who wants to battle him?" First heaven celestial kings couldn't elicit his desire to do battle. The Rain Emperor, Ji Wuming, Hunyo, and the others all shook their heads. They couldn't be bothered fighting a first heaven celestial king. There was no fun and challenge at all. Ling Han involuntarily sighed. Since no one volunteered, he had no option but to step forward himself. After all, who told him to jump out first? However, Lu Shi didn't understand this dynamic, and he thought that these people were afraid of him. He couldn't help but roar with laughter. He leaped forward, summoning the great Tao of fire and transforming it into a blade that slashed down at Ling Han. A measly new celestial king dares to act so wantonly? Let me teach you some discipline. He dashed forward, and he was truly very nimble. He instantly arrived before Ling Han. Ling Han raised his hand, completely ignoring the flaming blade. His hand pierced through the flames and directly latched onto Lu Shi's chest, slamming him to the ground. Pung! Lu Shi was instantly smashed into the ground, with stars spinning before his eyes. He faltered for a brief moment, and when he finally wanted to crawl up, he discovered that there was a humongous weight on his chest, preventing him from moving. Looking down, he realized that there was a foot on his chest. Moreover, it was this foot that was preventing him from moving. At this moment, his memories came flooding back. Gasp! He had been defeated in a single strike. When this thought flashed through his mind, he felt so embarrassed that he wanted to die. Just then, he had still been boasting with arrogance, saying that he would teach Ling Han some discipline. Now, however, he had been defeated in a single strike. A genius idea suddenly occurred to him, and he immediately pretended that he had been knocked unconscious. He cocked his head and fell limp to the ground. The celestial kings were all astonished upon seeing this. Even though Lu Shi wasn't especially strong, he was still a first heaven celestial king, after all. Even those at the peak stage of the first heaven wouldn't be able to defeat him with such ease. It's due to the difference in their aptitude, a third heaven celestial king said. The other celestial kings nodded in agreement. Ling Han was most likely a prodigy among the outsiders. Perhaps he was a monarch tier, or maybe even a rumored monarch star. Because of this, he was able to easily defeat a first heaven celestial king as a newly advanced celestial king. However, the third heaven celestial kings thought nothing more of this. Regardless of how freakish Ling Han was, he would still be limited by his cultivation level. At most, he would only possess a battle prowess at the early stage of the second heaven. It couldn't be any higher. Another celestial king stepped forward and said, "Humph. Hurry up and release him." There were 2 ribbons of iridescent light around him, and it was clear that he was a second heaven celestial king. Since he was willing to step forward, he was naturally confident that he could achieve victory. With a cultivation at the peak stage of the second heaven, could he not defeat a first heaven celestial king? The third heaven celestial kings all nodded in satisfaction. This celestial king was called Ma Dang, and he was extremely renowned among the second heaven celestial kings. Many people believed that he would eventually advance to the third heaven. This was only a matter of time. Since Ma Dang has stepped forward, he'll be able to handle all of them with ease, a celestial king remarked. There's no need to waste too much effort on these younglings. What I'm curious about is, why did they dare to charge over? I refuse to believe that there's no one supporting them in the background. Indeed. There's definitely a scheme behind all this. The third heaven celestial kings all nodded in agreement. Prodigies who could become monarch tiers or even monarch stars were no fools. They clearly knew that this was a dangerous location, yet they still insisted on charging over head-on. There was definitely someone supporting them. Perhaps they were being directed by the other third heaven celestial kings? As they discussed this, Ma Dang launched his first attack. He remained standing in the same spot, and he simply made a tapping motion with his finger. Boom! A ginormous meteor crashed down from the sky, crashing toward Ling Han. It carried with it the great Tao of Earth, and it yearned to crush Ling Han to smithereens. Not only that, but the earth around Ling Han also changed drastically. The gravitational force increased immensely, and just this alone was enough to push ordinary first heaven celestial kings to tears in despair. Ling Han naturally wouldn't have any reaction to this. However, it was impossible for Lu Shi to continue feigning unconsciousness. He instantly started to wail in agony. However, because he was being stepped on by Ling Han, he was completely unable to move. He could only flail his arms and legs as blood gushed from his mouth. It was indeed difficult for second heaven celestial kings to kill first heaven celestial kings who were intent on fleeing. However, Lu Shi was rendered immobile by Ling Han's foot now, so how could he flee? Staring at the fast-approaching meteor, Lu Shi was so terrified that his face became green with terror. If he were struck, he would suffer severe wounds even if he weren't killed. He would definitely end up in a miserable state. Fuck. If you want to die, then go die yourself. Why drag me along? Lu Shi wanted to cry, yet no tears were forthcoming. At this moment, he truly regretted his decision to step forward. Fuck. A third heaven celestial king had already stepped forward, so why had he insisted on snatching the job? As he stared at the meteor in the sky, all of his past experiences flashed before his eyes. If he were given another chance, he would definitely become a carefree celestial king. Just how relaxing and enjoyable would that be? What was the point of thinking about all this useless sh*t? Even though he wouldn't be able to leave the celestial path, first heaven celestial kings were still powerful enough to wander around as they pleased. In any case, even if he returned to the outside world, there would still be ninth heaven celestial kings above him. As such, what standing would he have? He truly shouldn't have given in to greed. He truly shouldn't have participated in this mess. However, it was a shame that it was already too late to have any regrets. Hang on. Lu Shi was already about to close his eyes to await his inevitable demise. However, he suddenly discovered that the meteor in the sky was traveling at an incredibly slow speed. Perhaps time slows down when someone is about to die? Chapter 2484, Fighting Over the Celestial Tool. The regulations of time, a celestial king said in a solemn voice. His expression was as grave as could be. The other celestial kings remained silent. However, their eyebrows were also slightly raised in shock. Even though all regulations became equal at the celestial king tier, the regulations of time and the regulations of space still enjoyed a transcendent standing. This was mainly because they were extremely difficult to master. Even ninth heaven celestial kings could only peek at the secrets of these two types of regulations if they ingested the necessary celestial medicines. The regulation of time was far too difficult to comprehend and master. Yet, how had a measly first heaven celestial king mastered the regulations of time? Moreover, it was so powerful that it could even affect a second heaven celestial king. In the sky, the meteor descended at a speed that was visible to the naked eye. It was unfathomably slow. In fact, they had enough time to drag a bed over and take a hearty nap. They could then pack away the bed and calmly leave the area. At this moment, Lu Shi's agonized wails became slightly shrill and jarring. He was clearly a celestial king, yet he was wailing with such despair and grief even though he wasn't in any immediate danger. Was this not a joke? Meanwhile, Ma Dang trembled in apprehension. He finally understood that Ling Han's strength couldn't be estimated based on his cultivation level. Otherwise, he might truly be defeated by this newly advanced celestial king. He wore a solemn frown as he gazed at Ling Han. He then took a deep breath, deciding to unleash his true power. At this moment, Lu Shi finally came to his senses. He immediately shut up. However, it was already impossible for him to feign unconsciousness. His face immediately became beet red, and he felt as embarrassed and ashamed as could be. The others could hold back their laughter, but Hun Yo was someone who didn't abide by any rules. She immediately clutched her stomach in laughter. Moreover, her wanton laughter grew louder and louder. Great earth shatter, 8-word art. Ma Dang said with a solemn humph. He finally unleashed his trump card. The earth instantly rumbled, and it was as if it were about to shatter. Countless earthen spikes also shot out from the ground, yearning to impale and kill Ling Han. However, the first person to suffer the consequences was Lu Shi. He was completely unable to dodge. Even though he fully activated his defenses, how could he block a full-power attack of a second heaven celestial king? His body was instantly impaled, causing blood to drench the surroundings. This was a bloody and brutal sight. However, Ling Han didn't pay any heed to this, allowing the earthen spikes to shoot over as they pleased. He remained calm and unmoving. With his current power, as long as he channeled the regulations to protect his body, were the attacks of second heaven celestial kings not akin to child's play? He clasped his hands behind his back, smiling at Ma Dang, and saying, "Do you have a more powerful technique?" Great earth shatter, celestial bodies descend. Ma Dang roared. Boom! He unleashed another powerful attack, summoning celestial bodies that crashed down in an apocalyptic manner. Ling Han smiled faintly as he launched a fist at the sky. Regulations fluctuated, and the celestial bodies all shattered in unison. They transformed back into regulations, dispersing back into heaven and earth. "Anything else?" he asked. Ma Dang trembled slightly. What the hell is wrong with this celestial king? He's as bloody powerful as a third heaven celestial king. Even though he still had some trump cards, Ling Han had dealt with his previous attacks with far too much ease. Thus, Ma Dang couldn't help but feel that his attacks would be useless, regardless of how many times he unleashed them. It was simply impossible to contain Ling Han. Upon seeing Ma Dang stop, Lu Shi finally breathed a sigh of relief. He had truly been afraid that he would be killed by Ma Dang. After all, would you look? There were still numerous spikes piercing his body, and his blood was still flowing into the surroundings. He couldn't be any more miserable. Ling Han cracked a grin, and said, "It's my turn now." He ferociously summoned the divine demon sword, tossing it forth like a throwing knife. Pooh! As if ignoring time, as if transcending the notion of time, the divine demon sword arrived before Ma Dang in a flash. It then pierced into his forehead, nailing him to death. Fuck! A second heaven celestial king had died, just like that? Would you look? Ma Dang's eyes were still wide with shock and disbelief. Indeed, who could believe this? A second heaven celestial king had actually been killed in a single strike by a newly advanced celestial king? Huh? Ah? The third heaven celestial kings all turned around to stare at Ma Dang. This naturally wasn't because they were attracted by his manner of death. Instead, they were all staring at the sword embedded in his forehead. "Celestial tool," they exclaimed. They were all enticed by what they saw. Expressions of greed washed over their faces, and they all immediately lunged at Ma Dang, fighting for the divine demon sword. The might of celestial tools was transcendent. The Dark Frost Celestial King was especially fervent in his pursuit. He had suffered immensely at the hands of celestial tools. Moreover, if it hadn't been for her celestial tool, he could have definitely suppressed Hua Furong. He wouldn't have been obstructed by her, and he wouldn't have lost his territory. The other celestial kings had never possessed or perhaps even witnessed celestial tools before. Thus, they only had a general concept about its strength. As a result, even though they all rushed forward, no one was as fervent as the Dark Frost Celestial King. This was especially the case for the 9th Descent Celestial King, who hung around at the very back. Even though he had only met Ling Han once before, he had a very deep understanding of this youth. Ling Han smiled faintly. Wang. The divine demon sword immediately awoke, unleashing a chilling light into the surroundings. At the same time, a murderous aura soared into the sky. This was a vicious weapon. Whoosh. With a ring, the divine demon sword immediately obliterated Ma Dang's head. Radiating with a boundless glow of murder, it then turned to point at the group of celestial kings. Like a waterfall, celestial light came crashing down. The celestial kings faltered for a moment before resuming their fight for the celestial tool again. The more powerful the divine demon sword was, the more they desired to obtain it. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. The divine demon sword unleashed its might, with its sword light searing as it swept through the surroundings. What did it matter that it was being attacked by numerous celestial kings? They were completely unable to block its might. Even though they were surrounding the divine demon sword, they were completely unable to suppress it. This was akin to a group of ordinary mortals trying to stop a raging bull. How could they stop it? How? To defeat the enemy, defeat their general first, a third heaven celestial king said. Some of you go over to suppress that brat. Once he dies, the celestial tool will become masterless. At that time, it won't be so difficult to obtain. We vow to only fight for the celestial tool after the brat has been killed. The celestial kings reached a consensus. However, there was also an exception: the 9th Descent Celestial King. He clasped his hands behind his back as he stepped back from the battle. He smiled and said, "This wasn't included in our alliance agreement. Please excuse me for not participating." The other celestial kings were all astonished upon hearing this. However, on second thought, it was definitely a good thing that there was one less competitor for the celestial tool. Thus, they didn't pay much attention to this. They continued their attempts to suppress the divine demon sword. Meanwhile, two of the celestial kings charged toward Ling Han. One of them was none other than the Buddhist Cloud Celestial King. This celestial king couldn't help but sigh with emotion. After all this commotion, it was ultimately still he who had to suppress Ling Han. That being the case, why had they wasted so much time and effort just then? "Foolish brat, accept your death," the obese celestial king roared as he charged over. He summoned a great Dao, using it as a demon-subduing staff as he smashed it down at Ling Han's head. "Let me deal with him," Ji Wuming suddenly shouted. Without waiting for Ling Han's reply, he had already charged over. Wang! A burst of celestial light shot into the sky. He also summoned his celestial tool. In the past, this had only been an immortal weapon. However, following his advance to the celestial king tier, he naturally refined this sword into a celestial tool as well. Now, the might of the divine metal was fused with his martial intent, allowing it to unleash an unfathomable power. The Buddhist Cloud Celestial King was astounded. This was another celestial tool. However, he was immediately overcome with wild joy. This brat had actively come over to gift him a celestial tool. Haha! He would gladly accept this offer. The two of them instantly engaged in an intense battle. In terms of strength, Ji Wuming was actually quite a bit weaker than Ling Han, with his vitality index only just passing 8,000. However, once he summoned his celestial tool, things would be completely different. Chapter 2485, Fatal Strike. Hua Furong was unwilling to be left out of the action, and she also retrieved her celestial tool as she charged into battle. Her battle prowess was even more terrifying, and as she unleashed the might of her ancient mirror, she was fearless as she crashed and bulldozed through the group of celestial kings. Meanwhile, Ling Han used his bare fists to battle against a third heaven celestial king. This person was none other than the Red Snow Celestial King. He was at the late stage of the third heaven, and his battle prowess was no weaker than the Dark Frost Celestial Kings. Moreover, he also practiced the Great Tao of Water, and his power was simply terrifying. With a single wave of his hand, red snow would fall from the sky. Even third heaven celestial kings would scream in agony if they were struck by a single snowflake. Facing such an opponent, even Hua Furong would need to use her celestial tool to keep the battle on even terms. However, Ling Han simply swung his bare fists. With him unleashing both his power of regulations and body art together, his battle prowess directly soared to 8,500. Even though this was still inferior to the Red Snow Celestial King, he could at least keep the battle competitive. This caused the Red Snow Celestial King to suck in a sharp breath. This was a newly advanced Celestial King, yet he could already rival him without using a celestial tool. Who could believe this? This was far too terrifying. If this brat cultivated for a few more years, and if he advanced to the second heaven. If they fought again at that time, would he not be obliterated in just a few exchanges? The Red Snow Celestial King brimmed with killing intent. Since he had already offended this supreme prodigy, he was better off killing him as soon as possible. Otherwise, if Ling Han developed further, he would definitely suffer grave consequences. Kill. The Red Snow Celestial King unleashed his full battle prowess, intent on killing Ling Han. Ling Han was filled with confidence as he unleashed his fists of fury. His devastating aura surged, with just a single pulse of it able to force an ordinary celestial king to vomit blood. He roared with laughter. However, he suddenly retreated, entering the region enveloped by purple light. Humph. Even if you flee to the edges of the realm, you still won't escape death today, the Red Snow Celestial King said with a cold chuckle. He immediately pursued Ling Han. Even though the purple light would suppress his battle prowess, it would equally suppress his opponent's battle prowess as well. Moreover, he also possessed subduing purple fruits, so if it really came to it, he could simply ingest one. That being the case, what was there to be afraid of? The two of them continued to do battle. However, the intensity of their battle was naturally far inferior to before. Under the suppression of the purple light, their battle prowess continued to decline rapidly. However, the Red Snow Celestial King was truly being suppressed, while Ling Han was only pretending to be suppressed. After all, his body art wouldn't be affected by the suppression of the purple light. He was simply performing an act to trick the Red Snow Celestial King. Their battle prowess continued to decline, and before long, their battle prowess had already fallen to less than 1/10 of what it had originally been. If this were in the outskirts, this would be the lowest that their battle prowess fell. If they stayed there any longer, it would no longer be their battle prowess that was suppressed. Instead, the purple light would start to damage their body. However, things were different in the central region. Here, their battle prowess could continue to decline. 1/15th, 1/20th, 1/50th. Their battle prowess continued to decline at an astonishing rate. The Red Snow Celestial King didn't ingest his subduing purple fruit. This was because he only had a limited number of such fruits. Moreover, the rumored great opportunity still hadn't appeared yet. At that time, he would inevitably need to battle again. As such, the more subduing purple fruits he possessed, the better. In any case, his battle prowess was superior to Ling Han's. Regardless of how much they were suppressed, as long as Ling Han didn't ingest a subduing purple fruit, he wouldn't ingest one either. A fruit saved was a fruit earned. Meanwhile, Ling Han was waiting for an opportunity. He was waiting for an opportunity to deliver a fatal strike. Moreover, this was his only opportunity. Afterward, the others would all realize that his battle prowess wasn't affected by the purple light. Thus, he wouldn't be able to trick them into danger anymore. 1/80th, 1/90th, 100th. It's time. Ling Han suddenly unleashed his power, activating the devastating might of his body art. It was completely unaffected by the purple light, and his battle prowess immediately soared to the peak stage of the third heaven. He launched a punch, one that was filled with killing intent and carried a boundless might. The red snow celestial king's eyes widened in shock. Not in his wildest dreams had he imagined that Ling Han would suddenly unleash such an overwhelming battle prowess at this time. This was simply unfathomable. Under his suppression, how could Ling Han have ingested a subduing purple fruit? Even if he had, the red snow celestial king would have definitely witnessed it. At this moment, Ling Han's battle prowess was wild and profound. The red snow celestial king was transfixed with shock. This punch was truly going to kill him. In his current state, how could he block such a ferocious attack? He let out a furious roar, unleashing his full power to block the attack as he retrieved a subduing purple fruit to ingest. He was going to immediately recover his battle prowess. Pooh! However, it was all too late. Ling Han's fist smashed into the red snow celestial king's face, directly obliterating his mind. A mighty celestial king, a domineering force on the celestial path, was killed just like that. Quang! Heaven and earth shared the grief, unleashing a haze of blood rain. Ling Han retracted his fist. His body was drenched in the blood of a celestial king, causing him to radiate with a harrowing aura akin to that of a primordial demon god. Inside the tower, the celestial kings who were fighting over the divine demon's sword all stopped in their tracks. They wore stunned expressions as they stared at Ling Han. This was inconceivable. This was simply inconceivable. Even if it were them, they were certain that they couldn't kill the red snow celestial king in a one-on-one battle. However, Ling Han had succeeded. No, something's not right. That brat doesn't possess a superior battle prowess. Rather, he can maintain his battle prowess under the influence of the purple light, a celestial king said. Even though they hadn't been paying attention to Ling Han just then, as third heaven celestial kings, they could naturally grasp what was going on in their surroundings. With just a little thought, they could immediately realize what was going on. He ingested a subduing purple fruit? Impossible. Red snow isn't that stupid. If his opponent had ingested a subduing purple fruit, he would have definitely done the same. In other words, this brat possesses a unique skill that allows him to remain unaffected by the purple light. Thus, he set a trap for Red Snow. Red Snow died an unjust death. The celestial kings all sighed softly. In terms of strength, the Red Snow celestial king was no weaker than Ling Han. In fact, he was more powerful than Ling Han. However, the result was ironically the opposite. He had been brutally killed by Ling Han. In any case, after realizing this, the other celestial kings would naturally pay more attention to Ling Han. They wouldn't give him another opportunity. However, this region was far too large. If Ling Han insisted on staying here, perhaps they would have to hide in the tower forever? Ling Han waved his hand. Whoosh! The divine demon sword flew over, with its sharpness so deadly that even the third heaven celestial kings couldn't block it. With an ice-cold flash, the divine demon's sword reappeared in Ling Han's hand. He strode forward with sword in hand, making his way toward the tower. His aura boiled, and his killing intent surged, intertwining together as they soared into the sky. This was utterly terrifying. With the exception of the ninth descent celestial king, the other celestial kings all felt a sense of regret. Why had they offended such a ruthless demon? However, upon further thought, they discovered that the Dark Frost celestial king's invitation at this time appeared to be far too coincidental. It felt suspiciously like a setup. However, they had already shown such hostility toward Ling Han. They had attempted to steal his treasure, and they had even attempted to kill him. How could they possibly reconcile? If someone had tried everything they could to kill them, yet tried to obsequiously make up for past wrongs when the victims became more powerful, would the latter forgive them? We have to kill him. Today. The Celestial Kings reached a consensus. At this moment, they were thoroughly screwed over by the Dark Frost Celestial King. Ling Han rushed forward with his sword, sending arcs of ice-cold light into the surroundings. No one could rival him. His base vitality index had already reached 8,400. This was equivalent to the peak stage of the third heaven. However, the third heaven celestial kings here were all at least emperor tiers, so their vitality indices were naturally greater than 8,400. They had probably reached a height of 8,600, a level significantly stronger than Ling Han. However, with the divine demon sword, Ling Han immediately became peerless and unstoppable. He was a lone swordsman, yet his domineering attacks sent the Celestial Kings into a chaotic scramble. The Celestial Kings were filled with great resentment. They were clearly stronger than Ling Han, yet because they lacked a celestial tool, they were almost unable to rival him. Detestable. Utterly detestable. Chapter 2486, Lending a Hand. Right now, the Celestial Kings were stuck between a rock and a hard place. They couldn't retreat. Once they exited the Black Tower, even though the battlefield would become larger and afford them more space to move, they would be suppressed by the pervasive purple light. As a result, their battle prowess would fall drastically. At that time, they would face the danger of being insta-killed by Ling Han. However, if they continued to do battle here, the devastating power of Ling Han's divine demon sword would also eventually wound them. What should they do? After battling for a while, a celestial king finally made up his mind and resolutely fled. In any case, there were others holding Ling Han back for him, so what better opportunity was there to flee? At any rate, they all possessed their own towers. While some specialized in refining alchemical pills or refining tools, others specialized in powerful offensive or defensive abilities. Thus, they wouldn't need to be afraid of Ling Han. With someone setting an example, many others also followed suit. In any case, it would be fine as long as they weren't the last person remaining. With this in mind, a dozen or so celestial kings fled in unison, scattering in different directions. This was a breathtaking sight. More than a dozen third heaven celestial kings were attacking a single newly advanced celestial king, yet in the end, they were frightened off altogether, fleeing with their tails between their legs. Who could believe this? Ling Han didn't waver, and his gaze remained locked on the Dark Frost Celestial King. He could let the others flee, but he definitely couldn't let the Dark Frost Celestial King flee. However, the Dark Frost Celestial King wasn't fleeing by himself. Instead, he was trailing behind another Celestial King. This Celestial King had occupied a precious tower that specialized in offense, so as long as they reached this tower, Ling Han would definitely face death if he dared to attack. Ling Han raised a hand, activating the regulations of space to restrict the surrounding space. He was going to capture the Dark Frost Celestial King. In your dreams, the Dark Frost Celestial King said with a cold humph. He tensed his body, immediately shattering the restrictions around him. He unleashed a roar, yet he showed no signs of wanting to continue the battle. He was extremely resolute. Ling Han's body art wouldn't be suppressed by the purple light, yet his power of regulations was unable to escape this suppression. He was originally weaker than the Dark Frost Celestial King, so he was naturally still weaker than him now. It was almost impossible for him to capture the Dark Frost Celestial King just by relying on his power of regulations. Thus, he could only rely on his divine demon sword again. Ling Han funneled his power into the blade before violently tossing it forward. Whoosh! Like a comet, the divine demon sword instantly sliced through the air, shooting toward the Dark Frost Celestial King. Pung! The blade struck, and he could see shards of ice and frost crumbling. The sword pierced through the Dark Frost Celestial King's body, yet this was nothing by an ice decoy. This was the life-saving trump card of the Dark Frost Celestial King. Being as powerful as he was, and as prepared as he was, how could he be killed so easily? Ling Han soared over, grabbing his Dark Frost Celestial King with a single hand. With a bound, he then rushed after the Dark Frost Celestial King again. Here, only the sharpness and toughness of the Divine Demon's sword remained unaffected. Its overall might was also greatly suppressed. After all, as long as it drew on the power of regulations, it would suffer suppression from the purple light. This was unavoidable. Thus, Ling Han didn't plan to activate the Divine Demon's sword. He had to rely on his own power to kill the Dark Frost Celestial King. He activated his body art, unleashing a profound strength that was unaffected by the purple light. Pung! With each step, he would leave a crater in the ground. He continued to sprint forward, closing the gap between him and the Dark Frost Celestial King. This was inevitable. After all, the Dark Frost Celestial King was being suppressed by the purple light, causing his strength to continually decline. However, this Celestial King was a resolute person. He immediately ingested a subduing purple fruit, instantly recovering his full strength. The suppression of the purple light became useless, and he once again became a domineering and unstoppable elite. Old geezer, don't waste my subduing purple fruits. Ling Han shouted. The Dark Frost Celestial King faltered upon hearing this. Had he eaten Ling Han's food? However, he immediately came to his senses. Ling Han was already treating him as a dead person. In other words, his possessions were already Ling Han's spoils. He flared up in incandescent rage. This brat was taking things too far. However, even though he was enraged, he showed no signs of wanting to stop to battle with Ling Han. Instead, he seized this opportunity to increase his speed. Ling Han also ingested a subduing purple fruit, allowing his power of regulations to instantly recover. He accelerated time for himself before performing short-distance teleportation repeatedly. He was as quick as lightning as he shot after the Dark Frost Celestial King. The Dark Frost Celestial King was extremely powerful, so Ling Han's regulations were almost ineffective against him. However, it was a completely different story when cast on himself. His body flashed, and he continued to teleport forward, closing the gap between him and the Dark Frost Celestial King. The Dark Frost Celestial King was extremely alarmed upon seeing this. He had a feeling that he couldn't lose Ling Han. He had to engage in battle. Otherwise, once the effects of the subduing purple fruit wore off, his fate would definitely be miserable. Friend Chang Song, please lend me a hand. Let's team up to kill this brat, the Dark Frost Celestial King shouted. If he faced Ling Han alone under the suppression of the purple light, he wouldn't feel a shred of confidence at all. Instead, it was very likely that he would be killed by Ling Han. However, the other Celestial King completely ignored him, fleeing as quickly as he could. What an absolute joke. Even the alliance of the dozen or so Celestial Kings had failed to capture Ling Han, so how could just the two of them succeed? Moreover, it was also in such a disadvantageous environment. Could they have any chance at victory? Otherwise, why were they fleeing? At this moment, Ling Han had already drawn close to them. With a wave of his right hand, he launched the Divine Demon's sword at the Dark Frost Celestial King again. The Dark Frost Celestial King repeated the same trick, replacing his body with a sacrificial ice statue. Even so, his speed was still affected slightly, allowing Ling Han to draw closer again. A chill involuntarily ran down his spine. At this moment, he severely regretted fleeing from the treasure tower. Otherwise, with his battle prowess at the late stage of the third heaven, he would definitely be able to rival Ling Han. At the very least, he wouldn't be suppressed as he was now. However, there was no medicine to treat regret. The Dark Force Celestial King had no intentions of battling to the death, so he drew on all of his power to flee. Whoosh! Right at this moment, a long black shadow suddenly surged over, yearning to wrap around him. The Dark Frost Celestial King humphed coldly. With a thought, he summoned the Great Tao of Water, transforming it into an ice sword that slashed down at the black shadow. The shadow was easily severed. However, this wasn't the end, and even more black shadows started to shoot over. It was as if they were countless ropes that wanted to entangle him. Even as powerful as the Dark Frost Celestial King was, he would still need to spend some time to sever these black shadows. Thus, with such an obstruction, it wasn't long before Ling Han finally caught up to him. The divine demon sword slashed down, unleashing boundless celestial light. The Dark Frost Celestial King roared in fury. He truly resented the person who had attacked him from the shadows. However, Ling Han had already arrived, so he had no option but to engage. He turned around to battle with Ling Han. As Ling Han attacked, he was also feeling slightly surprised. Even though he hadn't seen his helper, he was certain that it was Hui. That person had also come. Hui's power was truly devastating. He had already become a celestial king. Even though his vines could barely threaten third heaven celestial kings, his vines were truly far too overwhelming. When he unleashed them, it was as if he were unleashing tens of thousands of first heaven celestial kings at once. This was utterly terrifying. Even a third heaven celestial king had been blocked by him. However, why was Hui helping him? These thoughts flashed through Ling Han's mind. However, he immediately cast them aside to focus on the Dark Frost Celestial King. This time, he wouldn't allow the other party to escape. The Dark Frost Celestial King attacked with his full strength, attempting to force Ling Han back so that he could create a path to escape. However, the effects of the subduing purple fruit were already subsiding, and the suppression of the purple light was causing his battle prowess to decline again. He hurriedly ingested another subduing purple fruit. He had to maintain his peak power. Otherwise, he would definitely be suppressed by Ling Han. At that time, facing the might of the divine demon sword, his fate could only be death. Chapter 2487, Sudden Change. It was extremely difficult to kill third heaven celestial kings. In terms of strength alone, the Dark Frost Celestial King was actually more powerful than Ling Han. He was simply unable to rival the combination of Ling Han and the divine demon sword. Thus, he had no option but to retreat. However, if Ling Han wanted to kill him, that would be an incredibly difficult task. The Dark Frost Celestial King possessed a myriad of techniques and skills, and his mastery of the Great Tao of Water had already reached a state of perfection. If it weren't for Ling Han's divine demon sword, there would be simply no way that Ling Han could rival him, much less force him into such a desperate state. While the two celestial kings did battle, Hui silently crept over. He still maintained his humanoid form, and he radiated with a heavy aura of death. He was expressionless as he stared at Ling Han and the Dark Frost Celestial King, and it was as if he were staring at two dead people. The Dark Frost Celestial King ingested subduing purple fruit after subduing purple fruit. He was a third heaven celestial king, and one of the more powerful ones at that. He had more so lived here for several thousand years, so he had naturally obtained an astonishing number of subduing purple fruits. Eating them one after another, it was as if he possessed an endless supply. However, each time he tried to break free, he would be either blocked by Ling Han or pushed back by Hui. As a mighty third heaven celestial king, he was actually suffering at the hands of two first heaven celestial kings. Even so, the Dark Frost Celestial King still managed to resist for 7 days. Only then did he exhaust his supply of subduing purple fruit. His battle prowess fell drastically, and he was finally beheaded by Ling Han, ending his life. Ling Han sheathed his sword before turning to Hui, and saying, "What a convenient time to arrive. You possess a great secret that I want to obtain," Hui said without any attempt to hide his intentions. Ling Han involuntarily laughed, and said, "Then you shouldn't have blocked that celestial king just then. If you had teamed up with him to target me, wouldn't you have managed to obtain it?" Hui sneered, and said, "It's impossible for that kind of trash to defeat you. I'd much rather follow behind you to search for an opportunity." This. To reveal his sinister intentions so readily and confidently. In this entire world, apart from him, perhaps only the large black dog would be like this. That dog and this plant should definitely become sworn brothers. You're not afraid that I'll kill you first? Ling Han asked. You're unable to kill me, Hui said in a serious voice. Unless you use that thing to kill us both. This person was truly talking big. He was far too confident. However, upon further thought, he did indeed have this right. He possessed countless vines, each of which possessed the battle prowess of a first heaven celestial king. With tens of thousands of them attacking in unison, even third heaven celestial kings would definitely be frightened. Moreover, he could easily hide his true body such that he was the only one who could attack others. That way, he would naturally enjoy an indomitable position. This was indeed a great source of confidence. Ling Han shrugged his shoulders and said, "Follow me if you so desire." When he exited the celestial path, there would be the large black dog before him and Wally behind him. At that time, it would be Huey's turn to yell in submission. He returned to the Dark Frost Celestial King's main camp, which had naturally been conquered by the others already. However, because it hadn't been marked with Ling Han's divine sense, it naturally couldn't resonate with his other camps. Thus, after Ling Han's return, he immediately replaced the current mark with his own divine sense. However, upon seeing Hui, everyone including Hua Furong revealed an expression of apprehension. This kind of living being was far too powerful, so much so that it shouldn't belong to this world. In any case, conquering this precious tower was extremely beneficial to Ling Han and the others. First of all, this precious tower could attract an astonishing amount of peculiar light and peculiar fragrance. In fact, just this one tower alone could rival the sum of the 8 other towers. Running the 9 towers together, the amount of resources that they could obtain was naturally immense. Secondly, this tower also had another function: it could refine tools. It could refine any kind of tool. Ling Han had obtained the Violet Divine Staff from Yu Wudi, and he had also obtained another celestial tool from Dongfang Rui. He had tossed both of these celestial tools into the furnace of the precious tower to forge new weapons. These 2 celestial weapons were naturally being forged for the Empress and Hunyo. Otherwise, their battle prowess would be unable to rival that of third heaven celestial kings. Of course, these were only celestial weapons and not celestial tools. The 2 women needed to mark these weapons with their martial intent. Even though this was a tower that specialized in tool refinement, it still took a lengthy 100 years to finally forge the prototypes of the 2 celestial weapons. Afterward, it was up to the 2 women to slowly nurture them. In the meanwhile, Ji Wuming and Hua Furong had both conquered a precious tower of their own. The Rain Emperor was slightly inferior because he didn't possess a celestial tool, rendering him unable to rival powerful celestial kings. Moreover, the obese Buddhist Cloud Celestial King surprisingly became a follower of Ji Wuming, and his expression was always as respectful as could be. He looked much like an obedient child. He had most likely learned of Ji Wuming's true identity. Thus, he naturally had to show utmost respect toward his grandmaster. The 2 women spent a great deal of time nurturing their celestial weapons, pushing them toward the level of celestial tools. With the acceleration of time, they would most likely see some progress in the next few years. At that time, they could also each conquer a precious tower for themselves. In fact, the most powerful among them was actually Hui. He was completely unaffected by the suppression of the purple light. It was unknown whether this was because he was also a plant. Here, he was able to unleash his full power. Being as profoundly powerful as he was, this naturally caused the others to feel even greater apprehension. He had also conquered a precious tower for himself. He was waiting for the transfer formation to open so that he could leave before the time limit of 10,000 years expired. At that time, he could wander the world. At the same time, the ruins also continued to silently transform. When there were only 200 years remaining, the small garden in the central region suddenly unleashed a peculiar light, illuminating the world. Was the profound treasure about to appear? According to rumors, a flawless celestial seed existed in this realm. Moreover, There also existed a secret technique that could allow those who had been trapped here for over 10,000 years to leave. Not only that, but there was also an unfathomably valuable treasure. Now that 10,000 years were almost up, it was time for these treasures to appear, right? However, the transference portals remained as dim as always. Only during the final 100 years would they finally activate. They would then remain active for 100 years before falling back into desolation, waiting another 10 billion years for the next cycle. The battle over towers continued to erupt from time to time. After all, there were many more Third Heaven Celestial Kings than those that Ling Han had fought before. Even though some of them were defeated, they quickly gathered themselves and launched a new wave of attacks, forming alliances if necessary. This resulted in many precious towers changing hands. However, no one dared to attack the towers that belonged to Ling Han, Ji Wuming, and Hua Ferong. This was because many of the Celestial Kings were aware of their might. They were more so aware of their backgrounds. Since they would most likely have to coexist in the Celestial realm, it was better that they didn't offend them now. Conversely, however, Huey's territory had been subjected to several rounds of attacks. With that being said, he was far too powerful, and he wrapped his entire body around the precious tower. No one could breach his rock-solid defenses. Year after year passed by. The small garden became increasingly luscious and eye-catching, and each grain of fine soil looked much like a black gem. They radiated with a precious aura, and it was as if they were hiding some paramount treasure. However, it was a shame that no one dared to approach this area. Even Hui didn't dare to get close. He had sent a few vines over before, but all of them had been ruthlessly blown apart. It would be futile regardless of how many vines he sent over. Day after day passed by. At this moment, the precious aura rising from the earth had even started to suppress the might of the purple light. If one ventured near this area, they wouldn't need to ingest subduing purple fruits anymore. Their battle prowess would remain unaffected. Someday several years later, the precious light suddenly became blindingly brilliant, so radiant that even celestial kings couldn't look at it straight. When this light finally dimmed, what appeared before them was a small tree growing from the ground. This tree grew at an astonishing pace, changing appearances each and every day. In just 3 years, it had already grown into a towering tree. A thick stem hung down, and on it bloomed a pure white flower. This flower then bore a gigantic fruit that was as tall as a human. Moreover, the bottom of this fruit just touched the ground. In fact, this fruit looked just like a human. Chapter 2488, Gigantic Celestial Fruit. This was a large and mysterious tree that had absorbed the boundless energy of this place. Now, it had produced a fruit in the shape of a human. Would this fruit give birth to a person? Or perhaps this was a ginseng one? The more time passed, the more divine and profound the aura emitted by the fruit became. Even Third Heaven Celestial Kings were extremely enticed. If they ingested this fruit, perhaps they could immediately overcome their obstacles and soar to the fourth heaven. Moreover, this tree had grown right next to the transference portal. Was this a sign that as long as one ingested this fruit, they would possess the right to leave even if they had been trapped here? This fruit is so large, so each person should be able to obtain a share. There's no need to shed blood over it, right? A celestial king said. This was mainly because they were afraid of Ling Han, Hua Ferong, and the others. These newly advanced celestial kings were absolutely unfathomable. Their raw battle prowess could already rival that of Third Heaven Celestial Kings, so with their mighty celestial tools, even Third Heaven Celestial Kings had to give them a wide berth. Fortunately, this final region was now overflowing with profound energy, neutralizing the suppression of the purple light. This allowed the Third Heaven Celestial Kings to regain some of their confidence. Otherwise, who could rival Ling Han? That's right, the celestial fruit is large enough, so there's no need to shed blood over it, another celestial king said in concurrence. Many celestial kings nodded in agreement. If the fruit was only as large as a fist, they would definitely fight tooth and nail for it. Now, however, the the fruit before them was truly humongous in size. Moreover, it contained profound energy, enough to satisfy the needs of everyone. If one were overwhelmed to death by the profound energy of the celestial fruit, that would truly be a massive joke. Ling Han gazed at the strange celestial fruit. He had never seen a strange fruit before. He turned to his companions, and asked, "What do you guys think?" "It's very strange," Hua Furong said. She had the appearance of a small girl, yet she was actually the #1 celestial maiden in history. In terms of the power of regulations alone, she was definitely the most powerful among those at the same cultivation level. Even Ling Han was slightly inferior to her. She pondered for a moment before continuing, "What I mean is, how did these celestial kings know that a great opportunity was going to appear here? How did they know there would be a method to leave?" Indeed, no one had ever succeeded before, so why did such a rumor exist? Who had first spread this rumor? Moreover, why were the celestial kings so trusting of this rumor? In fact, they had even left behind their own forces to run to this place. In the past few centuries, it could be said that this place had become a sea of blood. Heaven and earth would grieve time and time again, with a celestial king dying every few days. This was an astonishing number of deaths. In fact, most of the celestial kings who had been trapped here throughout the past few epochs had been killed. Of course, many of the celestial kings from the outside world had also lost their lives. Greed was a powerful motivation for cultivators, yet it was also the culprit that led them to their deaths. Ling Han nodded in thought. This was indeed a strange circumstance. He had inquired the 9th descent celestial king about it before, yet he was told that this was a prophecy that had been passed down from ancient times. There had once been a divine phenomenon above the ancient site, and the message that it carried had been passed down from generation to generation. Thus, the celestial kings all trusted this unconditionally. In any case, there were only 100 years remaining, so would any sudden change arise in this time? Ling Han felt like this was very likely. After all, he was someone who carried a halo of trouble with him. No matter what kind of strange scenarios he encountered, they would always wound up transforming into disasters. "Hui, what do you think?" Ling Han asked as he looked toward that silent and solemn person. He was also a fellow plant. Even though one was a tree and one was a water vine, they could still somewhat be regarded as distant relatives, right? "I have no thoughts about this," Hui replied in an indifferent voice. However, the fervent look in his eyes had already betrayed him. His expression was like that of a pervert looking at a beautiful woman. He was being dishonest, yet because he had never really interacted with others before, he didn't understand how to conceal his emotions. His expressions often gave him away. Ling Han purposefully said, "Then what if I fight you for the fruit?" "I'll kill you," Hui replied without hesitation. Indeed, this was Hui's true feeling and determination. He was intent on obtaining this fruit. Hui had clearly noticed or sensed something. However, he refused to share this discovery with Ling Han. Anyhow, even though Hui was very powerful, it wasn't as if Ling Han were afraid of him. Right now, his battle prowess was such that even third heaven celestial kings had to give him a wide berth. He truly didn't need to fear anyone. Of course, there was still a sense of apprehension between him, Ji Wuming, Hua Furong, and Hui. Each was a powerful opponent for another. Time slowly crept by, and more celestial kings arrived at this place. There were few native celestial kings among these newcomers because most of them had already been here since long ago. Most of the newcomers were celestial kings from the outside world, such as Enran, Elian, Xing Qinyue, and so on. They were all powerful first heaven celestial kings. These people would naturally pick a side as well, with some following Ling Han and some following Ji Wuming. For example, Enran was extremely invested in Ji Wuming, and it was very likely that she had already given her heart to him. However, Ji Wuming hadn't reincarnated for the sake of mortal desires and relationships. His only goal was to become a heavenly venerate. Meanwhile, Hua Furong was also a popular choice, especially among female celestial kings. It was said that there were fewer female cultivators. Moreover, the higher the cultivation level, the fewer they would become. However, this place was filled with their silvery voices, and there were surprisingly 100 or so female celestial kings. They didn't seem few in number at all. Xian Rong also arrived. He still had yet to become a celestial king, yet he had seemingly come to some kind of agreement with a third heaven celestial king. His hopes of obtaining the flawless celestial seed were clearly in the hands of this celestial king. Now that Ling Han and Hua Furong had already become celestial kings, however, he had far less competition for the flawless celestial seed. Most importantly, apart from Ling Han and the others, he didn't view anyone else as his competitors. Everyone here was waiting. Some people were simply waiting for the transference portal to activate, after which they would immediately leave this place. Meanwhile, others were waiting to fulfill far greater goals. They wanted to obtain a share of the grand treasure that was about to appear. 1 day, 1 month, 1 year. Time silently crept by, stealthy yet astonishingly quick. The final 100 years were about to arrive. At that time, the transference portals would activate, allowing people to return to the celestial realm. However, the closer this moment drew, the more mysterious the towering tree became. It absorbed energy from the surroundings, causing its branches to dance like dragons as they continually funneled energy to the fruit. It could be seen that the mysterious small garden was withering at a rate visible to the naked eye. The crystal-like soil was losing its nutrients, transforming back into ordinary soil. It was clear that the celestial tree was absorbing all of the nutrients of this land, funneling them into the gigantic fruit to transform it into a paramount celestial fruit. Boundless energy flowed into the fruit, releasing a celestial aura. Just how mysterious would this fruit be? Everyone was eager with anticipation. With the final 100 years imminent, the fruit started to undergo even more drastic transformations. It pulsated with a brilliant glow, and it more so emitted the sound of a beating heart. This fruit was humanoid, and now its chest area was more so rising and falling like with the beat of a heart. In fact, through its skin, a heart-like matter was already visible. Each time it beat, the space around it would shudder and ring in a rhythmic and profoundly powerful manner. It was as if this weren't a fruit, but instead a powerful elite. Crack. Fractures suddenly appeared on the skin of the fruit, releasing a boundless and dazzling celestial light. The celestial fruit was about to appear. Chapter 2489, Shedding Blood. Everyone was filled with anticipation and curiosity as the towering tree absorbed the final bits of energy from the land. Meanwhile, the purple light started to push over again. When the celestial fruit ripened, this piece of land would return to normal, rendering it unable to block the purple light. This also signified that the final battle was imminent. Everyone prepared to do battle. This celestial fruit was astoundingly large, so the power that it possessed was definitely as astonishing as could be. If a third heaven celestial king ingested it, would they directly break through? Meanwhile, the third heaven celestial kings were most eagerly anticipating the ability to break free from the shackles of the celestial path. They wanted to return to the celestial realm and break free from this cage. The celestial tree gathered the final drops of energy, funneling it into the celestial fruit. Its leaves wilted and fell, and immediately afterward, the trunk of the tree also started to wither. It was as if it had experienced hundreds of years in an instant. However, the celestial fruit became increasingly radiant, with numerous symbols appearing on its skin. There were paramount symbols that even the third heaven celestial kings couldn't fathom. In fact, after a while, they couldn't even see these symbols anymore. All they could see was an expanse of celestial light and regulations. However, right at this moment, all of the celestial light suddenly vanished, returning to the gigantic fruit. It then exploded outward again, forcing everyone to cover their eyes. However, this celestial light vanished as quickly as it had appeared. Only the celestial fruit remained silently standing. Celestial chi rose from its cracked skin, yet this aura was no longer overwhelming. Everyone could see it clearly. At this moment, the transference portal beside them also lit up, with numerous symbols pulsating on its surface. This signified that it was now possible to leave the celestial path. Seniors, lords, I have no intention of fighting for these treasures, and I simply want to use this transference portal to leave. Please allow me through, a celestial king said. He was naturally a newly advanced celestial king, and he clasped his hands in respect to everyone around him. There were far too many elites present, so if they mistook his actions as wanting to fight for the celestial fruit, they might resolutely blast him to pieces without a single word. I'm also in the same boat. Please allow me through, another celestial king said. Since he had already broken through, the flawless celestial seed was naturally useless to him even if it were placed before him. Moreover, he wasn't especially strong, so he couldn't possibly obtain any benefits here either. If he stayed, he would only invite death. Following their lead, at least 100 or so celestial kings expressed a similar sentiment. Combined together, their power could roughly rival that of a third heaven celestial king. Thus, when their numbers reached a certain limit, they became fearless as they confidently strode forward, making their way toward the transference portal. They wanted no part in the imminent battle. None of the third heaven celestial kings stepped forward to stop them. Firstly, it would be pointless. Secondly, this was indeed a powerful force. Moreover, they had no understanding of this celestial fruit, so who knew what it might suddenly do? However, just as the newly advanced celestial kings were about to reach the transference portal, whoosh! A burst of devastating killing intent suddenly swept over, ruthlessly slashing at them. Damn it! The celestial kings roared in anger. They had already expressed their disinterest in fighting for the celestial fruit, so why had a powerful celestial king still attacked them? They all turned around to counterattack. With 100 or so of them attacking in unison, even third heaven celestial kings would have to treat their strength seriously. The killing intent was unstoppable as it swept across them. Pa, 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 pa. Blood sprayed through the air as numerous celestial kings dropped to the ground. Everyone was astounded. Which powerful celestial king had attacked them? Why were they so unreasonable? These people had already expressed their simple desire to leave, so why was this person still obstructing them? In fact, they had even launched such a deadly attack. However, Ling Han, Hua Furong, Ji Wuming, the 9th Descent Celestial King, and the others all frowned upon seeing this. This was because none of them had launched an attack. In fact, none of the second heaven or third heaven celestial kings had launched an attack. Then who had done this? They all turned to look at the celestial fruit. Just then, it was the celestial light surrounding this fruit that had unleashed the powerful killing intent, attacking those celestial kings. A dozen or so celestial kings had been killed as a result. Bloody rain fell from heaven and earth, permeating the area with a feeling of grief. The heavens were also expressing sorrow at the death of so many celestial kings. However, the fresh blood on the ground formed a small stream that flowed toward the celestial fruit. The humanoid celestial fruit was embedded in the ground, with its 2 feet reaching into the earth like roots as it absorbed the celestial king blood. Its speed was astonishing, and it wasn't long before the blood lost its vitality, transforming into sanguine stains on the ground. This was a shocking turn of events. This was simply a celestial fruit, yet it had actually managed to unleash such a petrifying attack. In fact, it had even managed to kill celestial kings. Not only that, but it had even absorbed their blood essence as if it were a gluttonous immortal beast. One had to realize that the combined blood of these celestial kings contained a terrifying amount of power. In fact, even third heaven celestial kings wouldn't dare to absorb all of this blood in a single gulp. If they did, they would be shattered into pieces even if they weren't killed. What's the meaning of this? Do we look like pushovers? Some of the celestial kings roared at the third heaven celestial kings. They wore grave and furious expressions. Many of them had 7th heaven, 8th heaven, or even 9th heaven celestial kings behind them, yet they had now been attacked by measly 3rd heaven celestial kings, with a dozen or so of them even being killed. Moreover, they could have very well been killed as well. At this moment, their rage erupted like a volcano. Some third heaven celestial kings felt it beneath them to explain, yet there were still some who offered an explanation, saying, "It wasn't us who attacked. Rather, it was that celestial fruit." "What?" the newly advanced celestial kings exclaimed in astonishment. How was this possible? Even though celestial medicines belonged to a lofty level, and even though they were especially skilled at fleeing, they were definitely not known for their offensive abilities, much less an ability to kill celestial kings. "That's right," many of the third heaven celestial kings said as they nodded in agreement. Even though they were fearless, they had no intentions of shouldering this accusation for no reason at all. Even though it was beneath them to explain, since it had already come to this, they were naturally willing to express their attitude. Seeing so many third heaven celestial kings refute their involvement with the attack, the newly advanced celestial kings also started to feel some hesitation. Perhaps that celestial fruit was truly powerful enough to kill celestial kings? Was it still a celestial fruit? It was clearly a demonic fruit. Everyone stared at the gigantic fruit. After absorbing the celestial king blood, they could now see a sheen of red on the skin of the fruit. It was as if it possessed a sanguine glow. Pung! 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 There was the rhythmic beat of drums, and it was as if something were about to hatch. The celestial kings involuntarily put up their guard. They were extremely careful, and they were ready to respond at any moment. Just then, a dozen or so celestial kings had been mercilessly killed. If the celestial fruit underwent some kind of transformation again, might it become even more wild and ferocious? Ling Han furrowed his brows. The more he listened, the more the thumping sound appeared like a heartbeat. However, how could the fruit of a plant have a heartbeat? Yet, looking at the shape of the fruit, it was clearly in the form of a human. Thus, it was seemingly acceptable that it genuinely possessed a heartbeat. After all, would you look? Light pulsated on the chest of the fruit, and its skin also rose and fell with the rhythmic beat. Was this not the beating of a heart? The atmosphere was extremely tense and muted at this moment, and it was as if a wild storm were about to arrive. Even though it was tranquil now, this was the calm that could invite a ferocious storm at any moment. Crack, crack, crack. The skin of the fruit continued to crack, with these cracks growing larger and larger. Moreover, it was as if an orb of light were being nurtured inside the fruit, with this light becoming increasingly dazzling as the skin of the fruit continued to split open. No matter where they looked, all they could see was an expanse of dazzling light. However, everyone was aware that the final and most significant transformation was occurring. The celestial king blood had been the final ingredient. After completing this step, the celestial fruit would finally reach maturity. Chapter 2490, Celestial Fruit. Killer. Pa. The skin of the fruit completely split apart, unleashing a blinding radiance that forced everyone to shut their eyes. Ling Han also involuntarily shut his eyes. However, his divine sense remained lively. After reaching his height, he already possessed an instinctive ability to sense danger. At this moment, he suddenly noticed a threatening aura soar over, and he immediately reacted without even looking, clenching his fists and throwing a punch as he activated his profound body art. Pung! There was a heavy thud as a dull pain shot down his arm. It was as if his bones were about to shatter, and he involuntarily stumbled several steps back. His blood was seething, and he felt as terrible as could be. Fortunately, he had kept the Empress, Hunyo, and bewitching maiden Ro behind him, so he didn't need to worry about their safety. He was completely shocked at this moment. One had to realize that with the power of his body art, the might of his fist could reach the peak stage of the third heaven. However, he had actually suffered such pain that it was as if his fist were about to split apart. Moreover, it felt as if his blood were about to spurt from his body. Just how powerful was his opponent? Had he punched a block of divine metal? Wang! The divine demon sword materialized in his hand. He refused to believe that he couldn't rival his opponent with a celestial tool. However, agonized wails pierced the air around him, and it was evident that the mysterious assailant hadn't only attacked him. Instead, they had attacked everyone indiscriminately. Judging by the power of their attacks, Ling Han concluded that even Second Heaven Celestial Kings would be insta-killed by this person, much less First Heaven Celestial Kings. Moreover, the light remained so blinding that even he couldn't open his eyes. Thus, it was only natural that the others couldn't open their eyes either. They could only suffer this brutal massacre. The more dangerous the situation, the more composed Ling Han became. Luan Xing, Nyo, stand in a triangular formation with me. Bewitching Maiden Row, you stand in the middle. The three women all replied in acknowledgement. At this moment, no one would act impetuously. Second brother. Ling Han then called. I'm fine, the Rain Emperor replied. Brother Ji? Yeah. Hua Furong? Yep. Ling Han confirmed everyone's safety one by one. Everyone had been attacked, and those like Yi and Yen Xianlu had more so been wounded in a single strike. If they hadn't been close to Ji Wuming and Hua Furong, they would have definitely suffered a much more brutal fate. Fortunately, they had only got a scare. Everyone slowly gathered together, forming a more powerful defensive block. The sound of the agonized wails died down, and the pervasive blinding light also slowly dissipated. After several dozen seconds, everyone finally regained their sight. The survivors had formed 7 main defensive groups, each of which was led by Third Heaven Celestial Kings. Surrounded by these 7 groups was the place that had once nurtured the celestial fruit, where a naked person was standing. However, because of the dazzling light radiating from his body, he didn't need to worry about his privates being exposed. Not only was this person stark naked, but he was also bald and without eyebrows. Looking carefully, this person was actually completely hairless. Many celestial kings lay on the ground. Most of them were at the first heaven, and most of them were newly advanced celestial kings. They had managed to break into the top echelon of the world, giving them the freedom to act wantonly, yet they had been killed before they could even leave the celestial path. This was truly a pitiful sight. Who are you? Ling Han asked with sword in hand. He was certain that this hairless person was the culprit. The strength of this person was truly petrifying. In just a few dozen seconds, he had managed to kill more than 1,000 celestial kings. Heaven and earth grieved as if it were the end of the world. The eyes of the hairless person had initially been shut. Now, however, he suddenly opened them. Crack. As if heavenly tribulation were unleashing its might, 2 bolts of lightning arced across the sky. Ling Han felt a flash before his eyes, after which a sense of danger suddenly surged over. He instinctively swung his sword. Wang! The divine demon sword shuddered. Ling Han couldn't help but feel shocked. At this moment, the hairless person had already arrived before him, aiming to crush his head with a single swipe. However, his attack was blocked by the divine demon sword. What shocked Ling Han was the fact that the divine demon sword had clearly slashed into the hairless person's arm, yet it had completely failed to breach his defenses. Even celestial tools couldn't wound him. Ling Han understood that celestial tools weren't invincible. As long as one reached the 8th or 9th heaven, they could envelop their body in regulations and easily rival celestial tools. However, this hairless person clearly wasn't at the 8th or 9th heaven. His strength could rival that of Ling Han, and perhaps even surpass it by a little. However, he was still far from reaching the 4th heaven, to say nothing of the 8th heaven. Thus, there was only one other explanation. His arm was forged from divine metal, allowing it to become so tough and powerful. However, if his arm were forged from divine metal, how could he control it with such ease? This was incredibly strange and uncanny. Ling Han pushed forcefully, instantly causing the hairless person to stumble back. The celestial kings were all stunned by this sight. This person was unafraid of celestial tools. Fuck. Is this really a living being and not a humanoid celestial tool? Huey's eyes lit up, and an aura of death rose from his head, intertwining together to form a net. He stared at the hairless person with a fervent expression. The hairless person stabilized himself before stealing a few glances at Ling Han. He then retracted the dazzling light from his eyes, only to reveal a complete lack of pupils. His eyes were fully white. However, they weren't white like the eyes of dead fish, but they were instead white as if countless arcs of lightning were coursing within them. This was a chilling sight. You managed to block one attack from me. Not bad, the hairless person said. His voice was grating, and it was as if these words had been formed by stones scraping against each other. Ling Han smiled, and said, "It's always been me saying these words to others. Who would have thought that I would be on the receiving end today? Perhaps I should say thank you." The hairless person shook his head, and replied, "No need. You'll be killed by me soon, so there's no need to go to so much trouble." "Baldy, are you the fruit from before?" Hua Furong shouted. Her eyes were flickering with flames of fury. She had almost been killed with a single strike just then, and this was something that she had never experienced before. This was utter humiliation. The hairless person looked toward her, and a baleful expression appeared in his eyes as he said, "You sealed your vitality and deceived the heavens. You deserve death." "Huh? What's this got to do with you?" Ling Han asked. He found this situation extremely strange, not just the mysterious appearance of this bald person, but also everything else that had happened. A very long time ago, for example, in Ji Wuming's past life there had been no need to enter the celestial path to become a celestial king. In fact, even severing mundane tier, dividing soul tier, immortal palace tier, and cultivators of other tiers hadn't needed to go to specified locations to ascend. Their ascension would come naturally when the conditions were ripe. There had been no need for such complexity. However, from some point in time, a restriction had been placed upon the cultivation system, forcing cultivators to follow a specified path. Even so, the celestial path had retained the environment of the ancient past, allowing cultivators to immediately ascend to the severing mundane tier, dividing soul tier, and so on once their cultivation level was satisfactory. Moreover, he had even discovered the old home of the karmic life Heavenly Venerable's mother in this place. Not only that, but the Black Tower would also shudder each time he conquered a structure. It was as if it had resonated with something, and it was as if it had discovered some kind of treasure here, eliciting a reaction. Furthermore, this place had a method that would allow celestial kings to leave, and it contained a flawless celestial seed that everyone desired. Who had spread these rumors? If you don't mind, would you care to give us some explanations? Ling Han said with a smile. His gaze remained firmly fixed on the hairless person. The hairless person pondered for a moment before saying, "In reality, there's no need for me to answer your questions. However, if I want to integrate into this heaven and earth, I should probably try to develop some human emotions." "Fine, I'll answer you." "What do you want to know?" he asked. "First, please put on some clothes," Ling Han said. Chapter 2491, Heavenborn. Many people chuckled upon hearing this. However, when they saw the corpses of the celestial kings littered on the ground, they involuntarily stopped smiling. Even though the hairless person looked strange, his strength was truly able to move the heavens and shake the earth. The hairless person replied with an "oh." A golden glow instantly enveloped his body, and his skin also started to squirm. Before long, a suit of golden armor materialized on his body, completely covering him up. Not only that, but he even grew golden eyebrows and golden hair, completely transforming his appearance. Instead of appearing strange, he now looked like a handsome man. His golden hair looked as if it were forged from gold, and it even rang with a metallic clang as it billowed in the wind. Ling Han was even more astonished. Was this hairless person truly forged from divine metal? After completing his transformation, the hairless person asked, "Your second request? Do you have a name?" Ling Han asked. "Yes," the hairless person replied with a nod. However, he didn't speak his name. Only when he realized that everyone was staring at him did he finally come to his senses, saying, "Oh, my name is Heavenborn." Heavenborn? Nurtured and birthed by heaven and earth? Upon seeing Ling Han open his mouth to ask another question, Heavenborn raised his hand to stop him, saying, "I don't have so much time to waste with you. You can ask one more question, only one." Ling Han pondered for a moment before saying, "This is all part of your plan, correct? From the very moment that we entered the celestial path." "No, no, no. From the very moment that the celestial path broke away from the celestial realm, correct?" Heavenborn hesitated for a moment before nodding in reply. "Indeed." Before Ling Han could ask another question, the other party continued in a baleful voice, "All right, I've already answered all of your questions. Now, it's my turn." He raised his hands, with both of his arms transforming into blades that measured 3 meters in length. His body glowed with a colorful glaze, and it was as if he were wielding 2 celestial tools. The celestial kings were all astounded upon hearing his words, even though Heavenborn had simply nodded his head and admitted to a single matter. Just this single piece of information was utterly petrifying. To say nothing of 9th heaven celestial kings, one had to realize that even heavenly venerates couldn't impose additional requirements to the process of cultivation and ascending. Once regulations were formed, they would be like laws that would be upheld in a rigid and emotionless manner. Emperors could amend laws, so who could amend regulations? Heaven and earth. Regulations were formed by heaven and earth, so only heaven and earth itself could amend regulations. In other words, heaven and earth had changed the path of cultivation. At the very least, it had made some minor adjustments. It had more so separated the celestial path out, forcing those who wanted to ascend to the celestial king tier to walk this path. Otherwise, they would be unable to cultivate a celestial seed. That being the case, was Heavenborn a being who had been born in this Placia form of heaven and earth's will? Who could battle the heavens? No one. Even heavenly venerates couldn't. Otherwise, why did the heavenly venerates of the celestial realm seldom show themselves? This was because they would be targeted by heaven and earth once they appeared. It was also because of this that they were racking their brains and trying everything they could to advance to the 2nd tier. That way, they could break free from this heaven and earth and truly achieve transcendence. Die! Heavenborn roared as he swung his blade-like arms. Ancient symbols lit up, and he radiated with ferocity as he battled against the hundreds of celestial kings. Even 3rd heaven celestial kings didn't dare to face him. Even though they had blocked his surprise attack just then, they had all been wounded as a result. The might of celestial tools was simply terrifying. Now that Heavenborn was charging over head-on, swinging his 2 celestial tools as he did so, how could they possibly block him? Ling Han let out a battle cry as he charged forward. He was extremely interested in Heavenborn's background, so if he managed to suppress him, he wanted to dig out more of his secrets. The Empress and Hunyo also charged forward in unison. They both had celestial tools now, so they indeed had the right to face Heavenborn. Similarly, Hua Furong and Ji Wuming also charged forward. However, as powerful as the Rain Emperor was, he had no right to interfere in this battle. This was because he didn't own a celestial tool. As such, the gulf in power was far too large. Their group was definitely the most powerful, with all 5 celestial kings already at the 3rd heaven one. Add to that their celestial tools, and they indeed had the right to battle against Heavenborn. Meanwhile, Hui chose to remain put. His expression was dark, and it was as if he were mulling over something, weighing up his gains and losses. Heavenborn was truly powerful, displaying a peerless might as he brandished his twin blades. Even against 5 powerful celestial kings with celestial tools, he still remained calm and unhurried as he danced around. In fact, his battle prowess was only slightly superior to that of the others. Thus, theoretically speaking, he shouldn't have been able to rival the 5 3rd heaven celestial kings. However, his physique was far too unique, allowing him to remain unfazed even when he was struck by celestial tools. His wounds would be shallow, and no blood would flow from them. It was as if his foes had struck divine metal. Was he still a living being? He was clearly a humanoid celestial tool. Seize this opportunity to leave, the surviving members of the newly advanced celestial kings exclaimed. They needed to take this chance to enter the transference portal. Otherwise, once Heavenborn disposed of Ling Han and the others, none of them would be able to escape. They all dashed forward, aiming to enter the transference portal. Whoosh! There was a flash of golden light, after which blood sprayed through the air. Several celestial kings collapsed to the ground, dead. Heaven and earth wailed in grief. This was the doing of Heavenborn. He was truly powerful, being able to come and go as he pleased. Ling Han and the others couldn't obstruct him at all. At this moment, Heavenborn's strength surprisingly soared by an explosive amount. Ling Han immediately came to his senses, exclaiming, "He can absorb the vitality of celestial kings to nurture and strengthen himself." It was no wonder he had massacred so many celestial kings immediately after entering the world. This was in order to strengthen himself. His reason for preventing them from leaving was also the same. They were all nutrients for his growth, so he naturally couldn't waste these precious cultivation resources. He was a downright monster who relied on slaughter and absorbing the vitality of celestial kings in order to strengthen himself. There was definitely no precedent to this. Heavenborn. Heavenborn. Nurtured and born by heaven and earth. Is this foreshadowing something? Hua Furong muttered with a frown. Perhaps this was an intentional creation of heaven and earth? Hui. Are you still going to stand around? Ling Han shouted. With Huey's help, perhaps they could suppress Heavenborn. Hesitation flashed across Huey's face. He had once been a celestial medicine. Even though he had now become a powerful celestial king, his thought process was still vastly different from that of the others. He had his own unique values. Was it worth it to interfere? Don't seek death. Heavenborn said as he glanced over with a cold expression. As a wood spirit, you should understand this. Meanwhile, my body has been forged from divine metal, so if you choose to oppose me, your fate can only be death. In the past, you were already no match for me. Now, you're even more so no match for me. Seeing that we have the same origins, I can allow you to live. However, don't seek death. Ling Han and the others were deeply astonished. As it turned out, Hui and Heavenborn were actually old acquaintances. It was no wonder that Huey's strength was also earth-shattering. He had most likely gone through the same experience as Heavenborn. With his hundreds of thousands of vines, he was peerless among those at the same cultivation level. Humans simply couldn't attain such strength through cultivation. Such strength could only be nurtured by heaven and earth. Hui wore a confused expression as he replied, "You know me? Haha. So you haven't recovered from that battle yet. I guess that makes sense. At that time, we fought using our divine senses, battling for the chance to be born. With your wounds, it's no surprise that your memory has been affected," Heavenborn said in a proud voice. He turned his attention away from Hui, focusing back on Ling Han. "You have something that I'm very familiar with." "Heh, don't utter such nonsense with a straight face. I'm not familiar with any hunk of metal like you," Ling Han replied. Heavenborn didn't pay any heed to Ling Han's jab. Instead, he continued to stare at Ling Han. At some moment, he suddenly pointed over, with his golden blade transforming into a large golden hand. With a slight shudder, he then recited several cryptic chants. The others didn't feel any change. However, Ling Han's expression suddenly changed drastically. The black tower inside him had awakened. Chapter 2492, Incarnation of Heaven and Earth. The Black Tower had fallen into a deep slumber long ago. In order to save Ling Han, his intergenerational disciple, the karmic life Heavenly Venerable had combusted his damaged soul and forcefully affected the circulation of the heavenly Tao. This had allowed Heavenly Venerate Wu Lo to recover his strength and thus suppress the Jiu Heavenly Venerate and the sealed emotion Heavenly Venerable. It was also because of this that the Black Tower had exhausted all of its energy. According to the karmic life Heavenly Venerable, Ling Han could only restore the Black Tower to its former glory after ascending to the Heavenly Venerable tier. Now, however, the Black Tower was surprisingly about to awaken. How was this possible? I was nurtured and born by heaven and earth, so after that unfilial karmic life returned to heaven and earth, I was naturally able to grasp his powers. Heavenborn said, casually dropping another bombshell of a secret. Everyone was shaken upon hearing this, going completely numb with shock. Sure enough, he was born from the willpower of heaven and earth. Using himself to fuse with the heavenly Tao, the karmic life Heavenly Venerable had sealed the two-realm passageway, causing his willpower to be trapped in this heaven and earth forever. Meanwhile, Heavenborn was nurtured and born by heaven and earth, and he had perhaps even inherited the will of heaven and earth. Thus, he had also obtained the karmic life Heavenly Venerable's skills. In fact, he had grasped even more of these skills than Ling Han, the intergenerational disciple of the karmic life Heavenly Venerable. This was because, in some sense, Heavenborn was actually the karmic life Heavenly Venerable. Indeed, why had the Black Tower reacted every time he had conquered a structure in this realm? Perhaps this place had been the past Tao Plaza of the karmic life Heavenly Venerable. Or perhaps the Black Tower had sensed the existence of Heavenborn. Boom! Ling Han's chest split apart, and the Black Tower soared out by itself. Even though it had exhausted all of its energy, it was still a Heavenly Venerate tool, after all. With its quality and power, Ling Han naturally couldn't obstruct it. Ling Han vomited blood. He had essentially been struck by a powerful Heavenly Venerate tool. If he hadn't been acquainted with the Black Tower for countless years, and if the Black Tower hadn't been devoid of power at this moment, he wouldn't have only vomited blood. Instead, he might have been instantly killed. Heavenborn made a grasping motion, and the Black Tower immediately landed in his hands. There was no sense of incoherence at all. He smiled, and said, not needing to worry about any rules, being able to slaughter people as I please, being able to act as I want. This feeling is incredible. He radiated with grossly sinister killing intent. At this moment, Ling Han had already channeled the indestructible Heaven Scroll to heal himself. However, would the wound caused by a Heavenly Venerate tool be so easy to heal? In fact, this kind of wound might remain even if he died and rose from the ashes again. In any case, Ling Han wasn't especially worried about losing the Black Tower. After all, it had always belonged to the karmic life Heavenly Venerable, and it wasn't a precious tool that he had nurtured and refined by himself. As such, this was a tool that didn't align with his Tao. However, he couldn't allow the belongings of the karmic life Heavenly Venerable to fall into the hands of an unfamiliar person either. You're not heaven and earth itself, are you? Ling Han asked, suddenly thinking of this possibility. After all, Heavenborn had referred to the karmic life Heavenly Venerable as an unfilial person. Moreover, he had uttered these words even though he clearly wasn't the father or mother of the karmic life Heavenly Venerable. As such, there was only a single possibility, was heaven and earth itself. Everything in the celestial realm had been nurtured by heaven and earth. All living beings were the children of heaven and earth. Heavenborn faltered for a brief moment before bursting into loud laughter. Even though you're not fully correct, you're already on the verge of the truth. Then why don't you satiate my curiosity? Ling Han said with a smile. I'm not interested. Heavenborn replied with a humph. He lashed out again, with his right hand transforming into a golden blade that furiously slashed at its foes. Meanwhile, his left hand held the Black Tower, which had now grown to 3 meters in height. He wielded it like a staff, sweeping it at Ling Han and the others. Even though the Black Tower couldn't unleash its power anymore, in terms of its quality, it was still paramount in nature. Thus, combined with Heavenborn's power, it could still unleash a terrifying might even when used as a staff. Ling Han and the others were forced into retreat, not daring to face its power. Ling Han sighed with emotion. The Black Tower had saved him and helped him countless times, yet now it had become a weapon in someone else's hand. Not only that, but it was even being used to suppress him. This was truly ironic. Heavenborn unleashed his murderous nature, surprisingly being able to target the first heaven and second heaven celestial kings even as he battled against Ling Han and the others. As the Black Tower whistled through the air, those who were struck by it would all lose their life. It had been forged from heavenly venerable tier materials, after all, so it didn't need to unleash its true might at all. Who could block it? Many celestial kings blocked it. However, before Heavenborn, they couldn't be regarded as celestial kings at all. They were simply like crops for harvest. Meanwhile, Heavenborn grew stronger and stronger after absorbing the blood essence of these celestial kings. Like a rolling snowball gaining size, he became increasingly powerful and unstoppable. In just a few hours, only 100 or so celestial kings remained. One had to realize that there had initially been 10,000 or so celestial kings. Heavenborn's battle prowess soared to the fourth heaven, a terrifying height. After all, which celestial king could increase their strength by so much in just half a day's time? Even as powerful as Ling Han and Hua Furong were, they could only defend themselves at this moment. It was simply impossible to stop Heavenborn. Let's go. We need to leave the celestial path first. They decided to break free and teleport away from this place first. There were many high-level celestial kings in the outside world, so would the 8th heaven and 9th heaven celestial kings still be unable to suppress Heavenborn? Even if he were the incarnation of heaven and earth, there was still Zhou to suppress him, no? This was a 6th-tier heavenly venerate, someone who was even more powerful than the celestial realm itself. Did I allow you to leave? Heavenborn said in a baleful voice. He lunged over, brandishing both blade and tower as he did so, blocking Ling Han and the others' path. He clearly hadn't activated the regulations of time or the regulations of space, yet the speed of his lunge was truly quite frightening. Fundamental power. Ling Han said with a raise of his eyebrow. He had also extracted the fundamental power of the Genesis world before. Thus, apart from heavenly venerates, he possessed the most expertise in this area. Fundamental power belonged to heaven and earth, and heavenly venerates would steal this power in order to transcend the regulations. By doing so, they would also be untolerated by heaven and earth. Now, however, a mere celestial king was actually able to wield this fundamental power. Or perhaps he was unable to wield it. Perhaps, like Ling Han, he had simply been tempered by this power. However, this still allowed him to become astonishingly powerful. This was simply unfathomable. What did this signify? He was truly fortuned by heaven and earth. In fact, he might even be the incarnation of heaven and earth. Only then could he possess such talent and abilities. You're also an unfilial child. Heavenborn said as he looked over. He resolutely lashed out, aiming to kill Ling Han. You need to return to me, he continued. Fucking weirdo, piss off. Ling Han said as he brandished his divine demon sword. However, the divine demon sword wasn't at the heavenly venerable tier, after all, so it continued to shudder under the forceful impact of the collisions with the Black Tower. It was as if it were about to shatter. This was suppression in terms of quality. The Empress and the others hurriedly rushed over to lend a hand. Not to mention the Empress and Hun Yo, Ling Han's closest family, even Hua Furong wouldn't ignore his plight. This was because their fates were now tied together. She had to help. Whoosh! A black shadow shot over. This was a vine. Hui finally joined the battle. Moreover, his target wasn't Ling Han and the others. Instead, it was Heavenborn. You're seeking death. Heavenborn roared in rage. His golden blade slashed down, easily severing the vine. Hui was emotionless as he said, I detest you. His outlook was very simple. He would pummel those who he detested. Heavenborn roared with laughter. Very well. At that time, I had already wanted to obliterate you once and for all. However, it was a shame that you managed to escape. This time, I'll engulf you and comprehensively complete my soul. He had never planned to spare Hui. Instead, he had only been attempting to hold him back before so that it would be easier to dispose of him later. Unexpectedly, however, Hui hadn't given him this chance. He had finally decided to interfere. With Hui joining the battle, the scene instantly became grand and magnificent, with tens if thousands of vines shooting forth at once. Even though none of these vines were able to rival Ling Han and the others as individual entities, once there were enough of them, they could force a qualitative change. Thus, Heavenborn had no option but to divide some of his attention to face Hui. Otherwise, if his arms and legs were tied down, it would be completely possible that Ling Han and the others might seize the opportunity to leave via the transference portal. The 6 powerful beings worked together to battle against Heavenborn. Among them, there was even a freak like Hui. However, Heavenborn was undoubtedly the greatest freak among them, brandishing his golden blades and slicing through the vines as if they were limp vegetables. Ling Han and the others were still unable to breach his defenses. Chapter 2493, Hopeless Situation. Heavenborn's strength was beyond comprehension. Perhaps his existence alone was already beyond comprehension. As the incarnation of the heavenly Tao's will, he was already extraordinary from the moment he was born. The appearance of the celestial path, and the death of all those celestial kings. All of this had been for his birth. Which elite's birth had ever required the death of tens of thousands of celestial kings? This was unprecedented. Heavenborn was extremely ferocious, with each part of his body able to transform into a celestial tool. His destructiveness was astonishing. Moreover, just how tough was his divine metal body? Even when striking it with another celestial tool, it was still extremely difficult to cause any damage. If they wanted to rely on brute strength, however, perhaps only the strength of 9th heaven celestial kings could damage divine metal. Ling Han and the others were completely suppressed. Even Hui was unable to unleash his full potential before Heavenborn. Even though his vines were numerous, they would immediately snap once they came into contact with Heavenborn. This was because layers of razor-sharp blades had materialized on Heavenborn's skin, instantly severing any vines that wrapped around them. Thus, Hui was completely unable to obstruct Heavenborn. The 6 elites were unable to gain an upper hand even though they had already teamed up. Heavenborn was like a divine mountain, lofty and insurmountable, draining one of any hope. Ling Han and the others couldn't help but frown. How was it possible for someone like Heavenborn to exist? A divine metal body signified that he was close to invincible. Even if one were more powerful than him, they would still only be able to suppress him, but not wound him. In fact, would it be possible to melt him if he were tossed into a furnace for countless years? However, even paramount flames could only melt divine metal, and not incinerate them. Thus, would this truly kill him? This was the product of heaven and earth's will. If he could be killed so easily, then wouldn't heaven and earth be far too trashy? This was just like Wally. He was the culmination of several epochs of work of a dimension. Even though his battle prowess wasn't especially strong, his analytical ability was something that no one could hope to match. Moreover, even the large black dog had failed to kill him. Anyhow, their situation went from bad to worse at this moment, with the purple light starting to creep over again. With the exception of Ling Han, the battle prowess of everyone else was severely affected. However, Heavenborn remained unfazed, and it was extremely likely that he was just like Ling Han. Perhaps he also possessed extraordinary body arts that had been tempered by the fundamental power of the Genesis world. Perhaps his physique was also transcendent above the regulations. Everyone started to ingest subduing purple fruits, recovering their battle prowess. However, the problem was that they didn't enjoy the upper hand, so what was the point of struggling in futility? One after another, they continued to ingest subduing purple fruit after subduing purple fruit, maintaining their strength. Even so, they were still unable to rival Heavenborn, with the number of wounds on their bodies increasing. These were wounds left by celestial tools, so they would cause severe damage regardless of where they were located. The remaining celestial kings were all doing their best to help. They could neither advance nor retreat, so they had no other choice but to put their lives on the line against Heavenborn. However, this was useless. Heavenborn was far too powerful, with his battle prowess infinitesimally close to the fourth heaven. He wantonly attacked, with no one able to stop him. Ling Han was as pale as a sheet, with the wound on his chest caused by the Black Tower still yet to recover. Not only that, but he had even suffered more wounds during the battle. This brought him immense pain. More importantly, even though he had also struck Heavenborn with his celestial tool, Heavenborn was a celestial tool to begin with, so what did it matter even if he were struck? It would cause him no harm. If this continued, they would all die. Perhaps he had to use the Dimension Scroll? However, Ling Han suspected that as an incarnation of heaven and earth, perhaps Heavenborn was unafraid of even heavenly tribulation. After all, no heavenly tribulation had descended during his birth. Heaven and earth had definitely opened the back door for him. That being the case, how could heaven and earth punish him with a tribulation? What to do? What to do? At this moment, Ling Han even considered entering the transference portal at all costs, after which he would ask Zhou Heng for help. Others might not be able to enter the celestial path, but Zhou Heng would definitely have a way. If it really came to it, he could simply rip the celestial path out from the void. A sixth-tier heavenly venerate was innately more powerful than heaven and earth, so it was definitely no difficult task to do this. However, it would definitely take him time to find Zhou Heng. Thus, it was entirely possible that the others would have all been killed by the time Zhou Heng arrived. Meanwhile, perhaps Heavenborn would have already fled, vanishing without a trace. He was nurtured and born by heaven and earth, so he could definitely blend together with heaven and earth in a flawless manner. Even heavenly venerates would be unable to detect him unless Zhou Heng obliterated the entire celestial realm. Perhaps Ling Han could draw everyone into a spatial god tool. However, with Heavenborn watching him, would that be possible? Heavenborn was a living person who more so possessed formidable strength. With no one to hold him back, how could Ling Han possibly break free? This would be an impossible task. With the title of number 1 Celestial Maiden of the Ages, even Hua Furong was wearing a deep frown at this moment. She couldn't think of any way to break free. As the reincarnation of the most powerful ninth heaven celestial king, even Ji Wuming was currently wearing a troubled expression. Heavenborn's appearance had shattered the restrictions of the regulations. Those who had cultivated step by step could never hope to rival him. Pung! Warm blood sprayed into the air as Fu Zhou's head went flying. Meanwhile, the golden blade engulfed the essence of this blood, funneling power into Heavenborn. Ling Han couldn't help but roar in rage. Even though he hadn't known Fu Zhou for long, this was his underling, after all. Seeing him killed right before his eyes was far too painful. Ha 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 ha. Heavenborn roared with wanton laughter. He cared not for the emotions and feelings of others as he continued his brutal massacre. At this moment, even the third heaven celestial kings started to shed blood. First heaven and second heaven celestial kings were more so like crops being harvested, with none of them being able to escape from Heavenborn's blade. A short while later, He Xinjue was also killed, his blood spraying across Ling Han's body. This caused Ling Han's expression to become increasingly cold. He was definitely going to kill Heavenborn. Amazing. This feels far too amazing. Heavenborn said with booming laughter. I don't need to abide by any stupid fucking rules. Being able to do as I please truly feels amazing. Unfilial brats, it's not only you people who can defy the heavens. I am the heaven. I am your ruler. Heavenborn was like a demon lord who was bathing in the blood of celestial kings. A mist of blood enveloped him, appearing as harrowing as could be. You think this is my full power? He roared with laughter as he clapped his hands. Boom! A column of flames burst forth, instantly transforming the ground into lava. Walls of flames surged over, forcing even third heaven celestial kings to jump around in apprehension. This was the great Tao of fire. Everyone's expression changed drastically. Not only was Heavenborn forged from divine metal, but his mastery of the regulations was also astonishing. The might of his flame attack was profound, and it was showing signs of surpassing the third heaven and directly soaring to the fourth heaven. This world has always belonged to me, so it's time for you people to return your power to me now. Heavenborn shouted. He was much like a madman. Did he truly view himself as heaven and earth? Ling Han humphed coldly, saying, "We've obtained our strength through diligent and painstaking cultivation, so you have no right to strip it from us even if you're the damned heavens." "Is that so?" Heavenborn said with a sneer. The corners of his lips curled up into a smile that was filled with killing intent as he continued, "Then I'll prove you wrong." He surged over with boundless flames. Combined with his golden blades, the formidable black tower, and his extraordinary strength, could anyone hope to face him head-on? "Perish, all of you, perish," he screamed with crazed laughter. Whoosh! He dashed over, yet halfway through his movement, his body suddenly froze. "Damn it," he involuntarily roared. "You've already fused together with Tao and returned to my body, so why are you still resisting?" These words were extremely baffling, and no one knew what was happening. However, something had definitely gone wrong for Heavenborn. Everyone could determine this. "Seize this opportunity," Ling Han hurriedly shouted. Heavenborn had already gained an absolute advantage, so there was no need for him to toy with them like this. Time to flee. Chapter 2494, Breaking Free. In your dreams. Heavenborn roared as he suddenly charged over again. Raging flames surged and golden blades danced. He managed to block everyone, yet a twisted expression spread across his face again. "Fuck off. Fuck off. Fuck off," he roared. After screaming, his expression became even more twisted. He bent down and clasped his head in his hands, unable to stop himself from wailing in agony. "Hurry!" Ling Han immediately shouted to the Empress and the others. The three women were all looking at him. "I'll definitely survive," Ling Han said with a solemn nod. The three women didn't say anything else, and they all sprinted toward the transference portal. Moreover, they weren't the only ones. Seizing this opportunity, the surviving celestial kings all dashed toward the transference portal as if their lives depended on it. Meanwhile, the celestial kings from the celestial path all sprinted as far away as they could. They couldn't leave the celestial path, so they could naturally only choose to retreat. "Stop right there!" Heavenborn screamed, with flames shooting from his eyes and slashing at the transference portal. A devastating sword chi swept over, slashing even third heaven celestial kings into two. However, Ling Han was already prepared for this, and he swung his divine demon sword to parry. Pung! He was instantly sent stumbling back by the powerful sword chi, vomiting blood as he did so. Right now, Heavenborn's battle prowess had already soared to the fourth heaven. He was profoundly powerful. Many more people leaped into the transference portal. At this moment, Heavenborn was completely unable to stop them. "Damn it! Damn it! Damn it! You're already dead, so why are you still disturbing me?" Heavenborn bellowed in fury. His right hand continued to shift shapes, transforming into a saber, a sword, and sometimes a staff. Ling Han was already about to leave, yet he involuntarily faltered upon seeing this. Why was Heavenborn suddenly acting like he had an epileptic attack? Was this because the karmic life Heavenly Venerable was affecting him? This indeed made sense. The karmic life Heavenly Venerable had already passed away and fused together with Tao, allowing Heavenborn to comprehend all of his skills. Even the Black Tower was more attached to him than Ling Han. At the same time, however, a portion of the karmic life Heavenly Venerables would also exist within him as a result. It was just that Heavenborns will enjoyed the dominant position. The karmic life Heavenly Venerables will could only affect him a little. Even though this disturbance was only limited, during critical times such as this, it could definitely become a deciding factor. Master is indeed the best. He saved me from another difficult situation. Suppress. Heavenborn roared. Not only did flames shoot from his body, but there were even arcs of lightning crackling in his eyes. His expression rapidly calmed down, and it was clear that the karmic life Heavenly Venerables was about to be suppressed by him. Ling Han didn't hesitate any longer, leaping into the transference portal. Whoosh! A burst of sword chi slashed over, as vicious as could be. Without even turning his head, Ling Han immediately parried with his sword. Pung! He couldn't help but shudder, and his body was crooked as he crashed through the transference portal. The scenes before him instantly changed. This was a dark spatial passageway. When he looked behind him, the transference portal had already transformed into a small white speck. However, he quickly saw Heavenborn charging over. He continued to pursue Ling Han in the passageway, and it was as if he were intent on killing Ling Han. Fuck! Ling Han hurriedly spread his legs and sprinted as fast as he could. Inside this spatial passageway, he didn't dare to activate the regulations to perform teleportation or time acceleration. Otherwise, it was very likely that he would disturb the flow of space and destroy the spatial passageway. You can't escape! Heavenborn shouted. His speed was astonishing. He hadn't used the power of regulations either, and he was simply relying on the might of his body arts. He drew closer and closer to Ling Han. With his immense speed, it was very likely that he would catch up to Ling Han in just a few seconds. Meanwhile, the Empress and the others were only slightly ahead of Ling Han. Ling Han steeled his heart and instantly stopped in his tracks, swinging his divine demon sword. Boom! Regulations burst from his body. Since Heavenborn insisted, he would destroy the spatial passageway. You dare? Heavenborn roared as he reached Ling Han. He swung his blade at Ling Han. Ling Han retreated, continuing to attack as he did so. However, his target wasn't Heavenborn. Instead, it was the passageway. Right now, his battle prowess was at the peak stage of the third heaven, so just how devastating was his destructive ability? It wasn't long before the entire passageway started to shake, with beams of peculiar light shining down. It was as if the passageway were about to shatter. Stop at once! Heavenborn bellowed in wild rage. Even though he had been nurtured and born by heaven and earth, gifting him with all kinds of peculiar abilities, he would also have no choice but to be washed away with the flow if this spatial passageway were truly to shatter. Of course, he definitely wouldn't die. With his divine metal body, perhaps only heavenly venerates and ninth heaven celestial kings could suppress him. However, would Ling Han pay any heed to this? He hastened his attacks on the spatial passageway. Pang, pang, pang. The entire passageway radiated with a dazzling glow, suddenly exploding in a violent manner at some moment. Ling Han was predictably sent flying. In fact, even his powerful physique and defenses were of little help, and he felt as if his bones had all been crushed into pieces. Shards of the great Tao more so pierced into his body, making him feel as terrible as could be. Fortunately, Heavenborn was also sent flying. Moreover, he was sent flying in the opposite direction. In the face of such a powerful explosion, even Heavenborn was unable to resist, having no option but to be sent flying. The explosions continued, emanating across the two directions. At this moment, Ling Han could only pray in his mind, hoping that the Empress and the others had managed to escape from the spatial passageway in time. Otherwise, they would definitely be severely wounded by the explosions, if not killed. His vision then darkened as he drifted out of consciousness. His wounds were far too severe. His chest had been torn apart by a heavenly venerate tool, and he had also suffered many gashes at the hands of Heavenborn celestial tool blades. He had more so been wounded by the gigantic explosion of the spatial passageway. Even a person forged from metal wouldn't be able to withstand so many severe wounds. After heaven knew how long, he finally regained consciousness. An indescribable pain washed over him, and he was completely unable to open his eyes. He attempted to activate his divine sense, yet he was only able to use a wisp of it after exerting all of his energy. He examined his body, and he involuntarily let out a bitter chuckle in his mind. Very well, huh? This body is truly riddled with gaping wounds. He had already suffered severe wounds in the first place, and the shock wave from the gigantic explosion of the spatial passageway had been even more brutal. Right now, countless shards of the great Tao of space were embedded inside him. This was much like a mortal human being stabbed full of blades. Was this much different from dying? Fortunately, Ling Han was no ordinary mortal. Even if I want to move a little, I'll need to wait for at least 100 years, Ling Han thought to himself. In fact, even after 100 years, he would only recover a sliver of his battle prowess. He was still far, far away from making a full recovery. Moreover, he involuntarily sighed. His spatial god tool had also been shattered into pieces during that gigantic explosion, destroying everything inside it. Right now, I can only rely on myself to recover. Ling Han wanted to know where he was, yet he was unable to open his eyes and also unable to release his divine sense. He was completely blind at this moment. He sighed in his mind again. As a mighty celestial king who possessed a battle prowess at the third heaven, what could he do now? He was even weaker than an ordinary mortal. He could only remain lying there. In any case, his physique was already at the celestial king tier, so the natural elements obviously wouldn't affect him. 1 day, 10 days, 15 days. Time silently crept by. Ling Han tried his best to remove the shards of the great Tao from his body, yet his progress was as slow as could be. However, this was inevitable. His wounds were truly far too severe. He could only take things slowly. There were wild beasts here, and Ling Han was more so in an extremely frail state at this moment. He didn't possess the might or threatening aura of a celestial king, so he was also unable to frighten them away. From time to time, some wild beasts would wander over to bite him. However, his physique was thankfully powerful enough, so the wild beasts were unable to consume him even though he was already riddled with severe wounds. In fact, the wild beasts that bit him would all have their teeth shattered by his powerful physique. After more than 6 months, he was finally discovered by someone else. Chapter 2495, Difficult Process of Treating Wounds. Young miss, there's a person lying here, a woman said. After a while, he heard the other woman reply, pick him up and carry him back to the clan. But young miss, his background is unclear, and he's also riddled with severe wounds. It's extremely likely that he offended someone and was hunted down by them, forcing him to flee here. If we're somehow dragged into this matter, the first woman said. The young miss was clearly unhappy hearing this, and she said in a serious tone, Lu He, what do I always tell you? Oh, one has to have a kind heart and always extend a helping hand when possible, the first woman replied. However, her voice was much softer, and it was clear that she was feeling slightly down after the criticism. Then what are you still waiting for? The young miss said. Ling Han immediately felt someone lifting him up. However, the maidservant instantly let out an astonished yelp. This was because she discovered that Ling Han's entire body was completely limp, with not a single bone intact. His wounds are actually this severe, the young miss exclaimed in astonishment. Young miss, to survive after suffering such severe wounds, this person is most likely very powerful. What if he's a bad person and turns on us after his wounds heal? The maidservant hurriedly said again. The young miss pondered for a moment before saying, if I leave him to die after already seeing him, my mind won't be able to rest easy. The maidservant was left with no option but to carry Ling Han away. Because Ling Han was now a sack of crushed bones and broken flesh, unable to exert any power, the maidservant could only rely on herself to pull Ling Han onto her back. Ling Han was unable to move, speak, or even open his eyes. He could only sense that he was brought into a room after several hours. A doctor then came to visit him, yet they immediately declared that he was dead. "Young miss, his wounds are far too severe, so I'm afraid that he can't live for more than 3 days. Even if he's only got 3 days left, we still have to treat him to the best of our abilities," the young miss said. Ling Han felt someone setting his bones for him, yet this was naturally a futile struggle. If the shards of the great Tao weren't removed from his body, he would be nothing more than a complete cripple. What help could ordinary medicines be? Even ordinary celestial king-tier medicines would be useless for him. He needed at least high-level celestial king-tier medicines. Right now, Ling Han was trying his best to recover his grasp on the regulations of time. Even if he could only activate a sliver of this regulation, this would still speed up his recovery process by a significant amount. Then, like a rolling snowball gaining in size, his recovery would eventually become quicker and quicker. 3 days passed, and his situation remained the same as before. There was no improvement, yet he hadn't died either. Even the doctor was astounded. After re-examining Ling Han, he again reached the same conclusion. "Young miss, he can't live for more than 3 days." 3 days later, Ling Han's situation remained the same. There was neither an improvement nor a deterioration. He hadn't died either. The young miss didn't call for the doctor again. Instead, she simply allowed Ling Han to lay in the room. In any case, her clan was large and wealthy, so it was no big task to nurture a sick person. Time flew by. 5 years passed, and the young miss had already married someone. However, she was the only successor of her clan, so it was instead her husband who moved in with her. Several years later, she gave birth to a son. Her son also grew up quickly, eventually becoming a father himself. Ling Han's situation still remained the same. However, if there were a celestial king here, they would discover that one of the shards of the great Tao inside Ling Han's body was starting to loosen. This seemed like minuscule progress. However, once this shard was removed, Ling Han would recover a sliver of his power, allowing him to accelerate time. Thereupon, his recovery would finally speed up. To Ling Han, several dozen years was no longer than the blink of an eye. Right now, he naturally knew that the young miss had only discovered him by chance after going out to hunt. This young miss was called Zhao Yulio, and her clan was located in a place called Vast Prosperous Town. However, Ling Han was unsure of where exactly this was located. After all, no one would go out of their way to speak to a dead person. He had only heard mentions of these matters from passers-by. More than 50 years later, the Zhao clan welcomed their 4th generation. This clan had few children, and Zhao Yulio didn't have any siblings either. Moreover, she had only given birth to a single son as well. Each generation only had a single successor. The 4th generation child of the Zhao clan was called Zhao Xian, and his name carried the meaning of passing down the flames of the Zhao clan and allowing it to flourish. He was only 3 years old at the moment, and he was truly as mischievous as could be. He always ran around the clan, and he didn't forget about Ling Han's room either. However, he hadn't gone as far as to jump around on Ling Han's bed. Each time he entered, he would simply stare at Ling Han and babble whatever was on his mind. This became a habit of his, and each time he encountered something bad, he would run over to tell Ling Han all about it. This finally allowed Ling Han to learn more about Vast Prosperous Town. This place revered power, yet the average cultivation level of the people was quite low. For example, Zhao Yulio could already be regarded as an elite even though she was only at the 9th refinement of the body refining tier. In fact, she was already one of the top elites of Vast Prosperous Town. However, the later generations of the Zhao clan all lacked cultivation talent, with not a single person reaching the 5th refinement. If it weren't for Grandma Zhao holding on, it was very likely that the Zhao clan would rapidly lose its status. However, Zhao Yulio was already an old grandma over 80 years old, so it was hard to say how much longer she could hold on. Everyone in the Zhao clan felt like there were dark times ahead of them. Zhao Xian was also no good at cultivation. Everyone in his cultivation class had already reached the 1st refinement, yet he still continued to lag behind. If it weren't for the Zhao clan's power and influence, the cultivation school would have already expelled him long ago. Teaching him was a complete waste of time and effort. Zhao Xian genuinely belonged to the category of people who tried hard yet didn't get any returns. He was clearly putting in a lot of effort, yet his strength wouldn't go up no matter what. He treated Ling Han as someone to reveal his troubles to, and this was because only Ling Han would listen to him without laughing and without putting pressure on him. Ling Han allowed him to speak as he pleased. In the blink of an eye, Zhao Xian had already turned 15. On this day, he was once again humiliated in his cultivation class. A young girl whom he had loved for a long time played a mean trick on him, calling him into a small forest for a secret meeting. However, what greeted him were several other boys. Afterward, they gave him a violent pummeling. "Undying Grandpa, what did I do wrong?" They said, "I'm a toad who wants to marry a beautiful swan. Should I really quit the academy?" The young man was filled with pain as he asked these questions. At the same time, he was also hesitating about whether he should truly abandon cultivation to live an honest life as an ordinary person. Right at this moment, a voice suddenly sounded in his head. "If you abandon cultivation just like this, will you truly feel content?" "Who is it?" Zhao Xian exclaimed as he shot up in alarm. He looked all around him, yet he didn't see anyone at the door or the windows. He then looked back at Ling Han in astonishment, asking, "Undying Grandpa, was that you just then?" Ling Han sighed, and said, "Yes, silly boy." After so many years, he could finally release a wisp of his divine sense. However, he could only use it for simple communication. He had stayed in the Zhao clan this entire time, so it could be said that they had helped him avoid the beatings of the elements. Thus, he was also willing to give Zhao Xian some guidance. "But your mouth didn't move," Zhao Xian exclaimed in astonishment. "Was this some kind of mystical power?" "Silly boy, if you want to become stronger, then shuffle over a bit," Ling Han said with his divine sense. Zhao Xian hesitated upon hearing this. Ling Han's appearance was truly a little frightening. He wouldn't suck his essential power dry to replenish his own energy, right? After pondering for a moment, he finally shuffled over. This was mainly because Ling Han was truly far too mysterious. Everyone thought he would die within 3 days, yet dozens of years had already passed, and his condition was still the same as before. Moreover, he didn't age either. Forget about it, he would give this a shot. You're tuning into the Biyao's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.